Good morning, everyone, and welcome to OneAbility's Annual Education Day. We're so thrilled to have you all join us today and appreciating one of the gifts of COVID is the opportunity to pivot to deliver this event virtually and to welcome friends from across the country and, in fact, North America today. So we want to kick off in a good way. So we're going to have an opening from Elder Alec Nelson in just 1 second. I do just want to begin by acknowledging my gratitude to be on Coast Salish territory, home of the Esquimalt, Songhees, and Wasanic nations today. And my name's Andrea Carey. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I will be your host today. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce someone that I just value and respect so much in my life. Elder Alec Nelson and I have had the opportunity to work together on a number of projects over the last few years. Alec is a proud member from Kingham Inlet Village and has been living in Victoria for a number of years and is going to share a little bit more about himself. He is a graduate of the same program I went to at UVic, actually, Leisure Service Administration, and he's a senior advisor and elder for the Indigenous Sport, Recreation, Physical Activity and Recreation Council of BC. And he spent 7 years in the St. Michael's Residential School in Alert Bay and has bravely been sharing that story so others can learn about our true histories in Canada. So welcome, Alec, and I turn it over to you to open us. Thank you for being here.
Andrea, I've acknowledged Andrea for her welcoming remarks and introduction. And in saying that, I want to acknowledge the Lakwana nations from where I'm speaking from at this moment. At the same time, I want to acknowledge our creator for this wonderful day. And I guess from myself, I just want to, in my language, offer gratitude and gratitude toward our creator for our families, our friends, our communities, and to recognize that we are never, ever alone, and especially in times of COVID right now. And so we're very thankful for especially our families. We also want to recognize the strife that we are confronted with and the grieving that is happening. And but at the same time, I want to say thank the creator for these beliefs, these hopes, and to continue our day knowing that there is light ahead of us. And so around the world, there's a lot of suffering going on. In our families, there's a lot of suffering going on. And there again, it's that belief and hope that the days will be brighter. I do want to ask Creator to be with us as we come and gather and shake hands with our hearts, to come and share and offer us strength, wisdom, and guidance for this next while. And so with that, thank you, Creator, for your wonderful gifts. I just wanted to now add sort of some comments to what I'm going to be experiencing for the next 3 hours. I looked at the agenda and I am going to stay and take this all in. And it was just crossed my mind about Mother Nature and the wonderful teachings that are available to us when we open our hearts and our minds. And I think about OneAbility and its function and its purpose. And it quickly brought me to a cedar tree and its function and its purpose in our lives. And cedar tree is very magical, it's medicine, and we pay high tribute to that in our cultural ceremonies. And when we use the term resilience, I just think about a cedar tree that has been standing for a while, has grown and magnificently showing itself to the world. And then there's a lightning, thunder and lightning that hits, and one of the branches fall off. And the question is, what happens to that branch? Does it lose its function and purpose? No, it remains and maintains its medicine. It picks itself up and carries on with its life. And that's where I see OneAbilities. And I think about my brother, Richie Peters. And I say, sometimes the cedar bough is struck, but it still maintains its purpose and function in this world. And so with this, I think about those teachings. And so with that, thank you very much for this opportunity to offer my sentiments and to be invited to this wonderful, wonderful gathering. Thank you. Back to you, Andrea.
Thank you, Alec. I was telling my daughter last night that I was going to have the opportunity to open with you today and to have you set us up for a good day. And she was telling me how they were playing a First Nation drum in her music class yesterday at school. And it just, it makes me so grateful that we're in a world that is evolving and appreciating the many gifts that Indigenous culture has bestowed upon us, and that we're actually taking the time to learn and for our kids to learn. So thank you for being here today and sharing your learnings with us as we kick off what I think will be an incredible few hours together. So I'm really glad you're staying. So I'm gonna just do a couple of housekeeping pieces for us. So if you are joining us today, just a few things to kind of keep in mind. So we have muted everyone, and we do ask that you probably turn your camera off as well, just for bandwidth purposes. In order to best view this, we are going to spotlight, we have ASL interpreters joining us today, so we are going to try and spotlight them so that those that need that service and want that service can see it as easily as possible. You can also, on your view screen, when you go to the gallery function, you can select on the 3 dots to hide non-video participants as well. So that can help you in your viewing options today. We will have different opportunities throughout the day for question and answer. Primarily, we're going to suggest those come through the chat box, but you can also try putting up your hand if you'd like to ask something directly, and we will do our best to get to those. We have a pretty jam-packed morning. We're going to try and give you a couple breaks in between and show a couple videos on those breaks. Yeah, we're really looking forward to some phenomenal presentations and some opportunities to learn and connect and grow together. So I would like to introduce our first speaker of the day. Marco Pasqua is someone that I've known for a few years now and have had the opportunity to be inspired and energized every time we get to cross paths, because he is just like a bundle of energy. And so I'm super excited to share his enthusiasm and zest for life with you, each of you today. He's an award-winning entrepreneur, accessibility consultant, and a speaker. He's worked in some of BC's biggest change-driven business leaders to support them to be champions for more accessible, inclusive workplaces. He has also helped pave the way for all Canadians to have universal access to programs, services, and places wherever they live, work, and play. And Marco and I served on a board together a few years ago, and he certainly does all of that and more. So over to you, Marco, to get us set up for some action-oriented ways we can change our thinking and our structures.
Thanks so much, Andrea. I really appreciate it. This is an incredible opportunity. And even virtually, I love seeing that we're able to have people connect with us today and get involved. Let me go ahead and screen share my presentation. There we go. And I'm hoping that everybody can see it. So when I was asked to come out today and speak about resiliency, mental health, and disability, I thought to myself, this actually comes down to creating inclusive communities, especially during a time where we really need to band together because, you know, many of us are very distant with each other. So I've got, 40 minutes or so to carve out exactly what I've come to when it comes to creating not only inclusive workplaces, because I've done work as an accessibility consultant in workplaces, but also creating our communities to be more inclusive. And actually, it's come down to 3 main things I've learned throughout my career. It's first, you have to change attitudes, then you can change any kind of physical barriers or overcome barriers, and then finally, you transform the leadership and culture of an organization or a community. But let's dive a little bit deeper into what I'm going to cover today. So defining disability. So we all know generally what visible disabilities are, but I think one of the things to cover as well is going to be actually talking more about not just those physical disabilities, but also those invisible disabilities as well, which I think is really, really important. Breaking down attitudinal barriers. So I'm going to get vulnerable with you guys. I'm going to talk a little bit about my experiences as a person with a disability, navigating the workforce myself and what that's been like for me. Then talk about overcoming the physical barriers and how the smallest changes can make the biggest difference in the world. We all start in different places of our journey. So whether that's in the workplace, to our cities, to our province and beyond, there's a place to start, but it's more important where you finish. And we're constantly learning and growing from this experience. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about some leaders that I've come to know and what they've learned along the way. Then talk about building cohesiveness and how we have to work together to create a diverse workforce and community. I'm going to provide some practical tips and tools so that you actually feel like you can walk away with something tangible today, that you feel like, hey, I can actually put this into action today and I don't have to wait, which is really, really exciting. What you can actually do to support inclusion wherever you are, whether that's virtually or in person. You know, this resiliency thing is so, so important. I know for myself, even as a professional speaker, I had to completely adapt my life and the way that I do things because now I'm working from home primarily. So it's about these accommodations and what we can do in our home front, in our work fronts to make it a bit easier. And then at the end, I do have a few minutes that I'm leaving in case people want to actually interact and have a couple of questions. But as Andrea said, if you have some burning questions, put them into the chat box and then we'll try our best to get to them. Okay, so first and foremost, changing attitudes. Now, attitudinal barriers towards people with disabilities are among the first that we have to overcome when it comes to building inclusive community and a workforce, as I mentioned. But of course, I want to give you a little bit more context as to who I am before I really dive in to this presentation as a speaker. So, who is Marco Pasqua? Well, what you wouldn't know from seeing me on a tiny little screen through Zoom is when I was born 3 months premature, okay? I only weighed roughly 2 pounds, 10 ounces. That's roughly about the size of 2 butter packages. The doctors told my parents that I would be lucky to even survive the night. In fact, get this, they told my mom to not even bother to sign the birth certificate because I was probably gonna die. Now, if that doesn't speak to resiliency, I don't know what does. You know, and I'm really fortunate because I've had parents and a family who's been supportive of me my entire life. But of course, it was not going to be easy. There is a struggle, there is challenges, but as our elder this morning said, it's in those challenges that you actually build stronger. Just because the branch gets struck, it doesn't mean that you're weaker. And so I got struck, but that was okay. I had to find outlets. And so for me, the outlet was recreation and sport. And so I went and introduced myself into various different team sports. I did everything from rock climbing to sit skiing, wheelchair basketball, swimming, horseback riding, weightlifting. I mean, you name it, I did it. And I wanted to show my parents that although I had cerebral palsy as a result of being born 3 months premature, I wasn't going to let that hold me back. So much so, in fact, that I went on to pursue a career, I went on to pursue sports in more of an extended ability for myself. And I actually competed in the BC Summer and Winter Games for athletes with disability to earn over 22 gold, 10 silver, and 2 bronze medals. And it was a real honor to do that in these various sports. I even got to meet one of my mentors, somebody that I'm sure many of you know who he is, Rick Hansen, the man in motion. This is really what inspired me to learn more about myself. But where did that all start? Well, that love for sport actually started when I was in high school. You see, I had a PE teacher in high school that didn't cast me aside, that didn't say because I have a disability that I had to have something completely different, or that maybe I could just bounce a ball against the wall because I just couldn't do the things the other students could do. No, this teacher was totally different. In fact, that quintessential moment, I'll never forget, because it was when we were doing a class and we had dodgeball, okay? Now, dodgeball in a wheelchair, I'm sure you can imagine, is not the easiest of sports. And so this teacher said to me, okay, you know what? If Marco's going to do dodgeball with us, we'll just have to make some adaptations, just some slight adaptations so that he can get involved. And so he made a rule. Okay, so if any of the balls hit me in the body, then it counts. But if you hit me in the wheelchair, then it doesn't count. But of course, this meant that now I was the first person chosen on every team so they could use me as the official shield to block all the balls. Ironically, this is actually a moment of major inclusion, because now not only was I able to be involved in the class, but now my students were actively seeking to have me part of their team. And I even developed some strategies around being able to store some of the dodgeballs in the spokes of my wheels of my wheelchair so I could unload like a Gatling gun. And I have some of these like really fond memories from when I was a kid being able to play these sports, but that's just it. It started with a moment of inclusion. It started with that, and that's what springboarded me to be able to define what disability means to me. Now, let's talk a little bit about the definition of disability. Okay, now when most people define a disability, they may think of something like this, a wheelchair, maybe something like this, a hearing aid, or something like this, a white cane for somebody with low vision or who is blind. But as I mentioned off the top of this presentation, what about the things that we can't see? Hidden disabilities, things like anxiety and depression, ADHD, autism, and learning disabilities. You see, you might have people today in your community or people that you work with who have some of these conditions, and for one reason or another, they've decided to not disclose this information just because maybe they're afraid of the stigma that follows having this condition. I know in talking to a lot of my friends and family who have these conditions, I myself as a speaker, I'm going to come out and read out and say it. I have suffered and struggled with anxiety and depression for most of my life. You know, but that actually empowers me. It makes me stronger as a speaker. It makes me and gives me the tools to be able to support you and other people in the community. But for many of these people, there is that stigma. Well, what if they look at me differently? What if they think I'm not going to be able to do my job as a result of having these conditions? And even though my disability is a lot more visible, especially when I'm in my wheelchair, I had some of these stigmas placed against me as well. In fact, the very first time I had a stigma placed against me was in my very first workplace opportunity when I was in grade 11 in high school during a co-op. I was so thrilled to get this job though. We had opportunities to go to wherever we wanted to work. And my dream was to always work with technology and computers because it was an incredible thing to be able to see how you could extend someone's abilities through a piece of technology. And I was so fortunate that I actually landed a job at the co-op in, at the computer store. And I was so pumped. In fact, I did so well during my co-op period that when that finished up, I actually asked the manager if he thought that I could join the team full time. I'll never forget the look on his face. He kind of had a look of concern on his face. And then he said to me, you know what, Marco, actually, can I take you out for lunch first? Now, being a guy who's never afraid to say no to a free lunch, I said, yeah, of course, you could take me out for lunch. Well, he took me out to lunch and he explained that as much as he was wanting to have me join the team full time, he had some concerns. You see, as a full-time employee, I'd have to do other things that I wasn't expected of me as a co-op student. I'd have to restock shelves and lift heavy boxes. And while he couldn't live with himself if I were to lift a heavy box and drop it on myself and hurt myself, I mean, that just wouldn't be good. Now, in that moment, I could have been offended. I could have said, how dare you place that upon me? How dare you place that assumption upon me? But I've always been a guy that makes, lemonade out of lemons, but also looks for opportunities. And so I looked at this as an opportunity to maybe change perception. So I said to him, okay, no, I totally understand your concern, but I'll tell you what. How about you give me like another 2-week probationary period, like you would if I was any new employee, even though you've been working with me for several months now. And if in those 2 weeks with these new roles, these new tasks, I'm not able to prove that I'm able to do the job in the way that you expect, then no harm, no foul. You can ask me to leave or you can let me go just like you would with anyone else. Well, He liked this compromise. And so the very next day, I started my first ever official job in working in this computer store at a full-time role. Well, wouldn't you know it though, that that's when the universe had something interesting to show me. The universe does work in mysterious ways. And in fact, a customer walked in who was looking for a video card. And the video card happened to be on the very top shelf, something that I was definitely not going to be able to reach. But again, I looked at this as an opportunity. So I walked the gentleman over to the video cards, and I knew that the most expensive, however, the best card for him was going to be kind of in that top shelf area, kind of tucked away. And so I kind of looked at him, and I looked at the shelf, and I looked at him, and I looked at the shelf, and I gestured as though I was ready to reach up and grab that card and grab it down for him, knowing full well I wasn't going to be able to reach it. But because I looked at him and used my body language, before I could say anything, as I was reaching up, he just reached over because he was about 6 foot something, grabs the card. He goes, yeah, I think this is the one here, passes it to me, and now I was able to make the sale. Well, the amazing part of this story isn't necessarily just the fact that I used his abilities in order to enhance myself. It was actually the moment where I shattered the perception of that manager, because he'd been watching this entire interaction go down from the get-go. His jaw nearly hit the floor. And it was in that moment that I realized that my own ability to believe in myself and to shatter not only his perception of me, but my self-perception of what I was going to be capable of was going to be so important for the rest of my life. And I think, I really learned some of those things about coming together, about strategy through those team experiences I had when I was a kid. So this was settled. I ended up working with this computer company for a couple of years. In fact, I love technology so much that I went on to pursue a career in the video game industry. And that's where we'll get on to our next section here about overcoming physical barriers. Now, contrary to what my friend Mr. Zoolander is saying here, it wasn't about fitting inside the actual building, because I actually did end up getting a career in the video game industry. I actually landed a job at one of the biggest game studios in the world, Electronic Arts. I pursued a career in video game design. I got my diploma. I was so excited. I couldn't believe that I landed the job. But again, the accessibility problem had nothing to do with the physical building of Electronic Arts. It actually had to do with the bus stop on the way to work. And so I'll tell you a little bit about my experience of that first day. So that first day of work, I had planned out my schedule to the T. I knew exactly what bus stop I had to get off at. I knew exactly through Google Maps what it looked like and exactly where I had to get off at. I was getting so excited. In fact, I saw some of my friends and colleagues that I'd seen in training at another facility get on the bus. So I knew I was on the right bus. And as I was getting closer and getting ready to get off at the stop, my stop was next. So I pulled the rope to let the driver know that I was going to be getting off the next stop. And I excitedly started to unbuckle my wheelchair and the harnesses that were holding my chair down and the hooks that were holding my chair down and in place. And I see one by one, some of my colleagues start to usher themselves off and get off at the bus. And as I wheel to the front with this huge smile on my face, getting ready, expecting that the driver is going to start to lower the ramp and let me off, as that last person who's in front of me gets off, before I could say anything, the driver begins to close the door and starts to drive off. Now, thinking this was some sort of a mistake, I said to the driver, wait, I don't think you understand. You see this lanyard? You see how it says Electronic Arts? I work here too. You got to let me off. But I wasn't expecting what he was going to say next. He said, I can't do that. I said, what do you mean you can't do that? He said, well, you see that bus stop sign there? I said, yeah. He said, you see how it's missing the accessible symbol? He used the word handicap. I despise that word. Maybe we can get into that some other time, but I'm going to use the word accessible. I said, sure. He said, yeah, well, since that's missing off of that bus stop, that means that the city has determined that it's not safe for me to let you off. And then that means that the next stop that I am able to let you off at is actually whichever one displays that symbol. Well, wouldn't you know it? The stop that displayed that symbol happened to be 3 blocks later. Now, I haven't explained this as part of the story yet, but Electronic Arts' main Canada campus is at the top of a huge steep hill called Sanderson Way. It's a massive, massive campus. So that was something I was prepared for. Wheeling up that hill every day, getting my arms big and strong like Rick Hansen, not a problem. But now I was being told that not only was I going to have to wheel up that hill every day, I was going to have to wheel back 3 blocks just to get to where my colleagues were starting. And that was hard to learn. And in fact, when you grow up in BC like I do in the Lower Mainland in Vancouver, that's not the easiest thing. Because now, if it was raining or if it was snowing, that would mean that by the time I got into the office, I would be completely drenched or soaked. Or goodness forbid that I would actually have mud on my sleeves and I was wearing an important blazer for an important meeting. And now when I got into the office, my hair was all disheveled and my arms were covered in mud. And now I'm furthering a stigma that people with disabilities just don't show up on time, just aren't prepared, and they always come kind of looking disheveled. But this was my reality, right? This is something that I had to accept. Until one day, I met a driver by the name of Chris, and that's where everything changed. You see, Chris, he'd been talking to me for a couple of weeks, and he'd seen my name badge and my EA lanyard, and after a couple of weeks, he just couldn't take it anymore. And so he says to me, hey, your name's Marco, right? We've been talking for a minute. I said, yeah. He says, Marco, I gotta ask you, man, I really do. I don't understand. I mean, I'm seeing that everyone who works at EA is getting off at this one stop that's seemingly at the bottom of the hill, but you seem to be getting off 3 blocks later, and I got to know why that is. Well, thinking in that moment that I was the smartest person on the bus, I kind of puffed my chest out and I said to him, well, you see that bus stop sign there? You see how it's missing the accessible decal? Well, that means that the city's determined that this is not safe for you to let me off. But the next thing that happened was amazing. It was Chris's reaction. And that was, well, that's stupid. I said, yeah, of course, I agree. I think that that's stupid too. But what are we going to do about it? I mean, we're just 2 guys. You're a bus driver. I'm one of the employees. And he said, no, you know what? I think there is something I can do about it. And with that, he talked to his manager, who then talked to the city planner, who then talked to the technician. And they actually determined that when this bus stop was originally installed, sure, there may have been things like uneven pavement or thorn bushes or things that were dangerous, but today, there was no reason why this bus stop couldn't be converted to an accessible stop. And I kid you not, within a matter of 2 weeks, they had permanently changed this stop forever to be an accessible stop. Now, this story always touches my heart, and it's hard for me not to get broken up about it because here's a guy who was just a member of my community. He's just somebody who said, this isn't right. And we can make a change. He wasn't wearing the CEO title. He wasn't a big executive at the company, but he said that this isn't right. And this filled me with joy because I knew that there could be a ripple effect that would happen of this, because even if I didn't have this job for the rest of my life, that stop now and forever would be converted to a permanent accessible stop, meaning that the seniors population, mothers and fathers with strollers, other people with disabilities would be able to use this stop forever. Well, it's a good thing that that happened, because in 2010, very similar to what's happening today with coronavirus, I lost my job during the recession, and I was completely devastated because this is the only thing I went to school for. It's the only thing I knew. I mean, I had dreamed of this career of creating video games to create characters and worlds that had abilities beyond my own. And now, due to the recession, that was all shattered. You know, I didn't know what I was going to do. And I remember the conversation, calling my wife like it was just yesterday. She was my girlfriend at the time. And I called her and I said, honey, you know, I just found out that I lost my job and I don't know what I could do. It's not like I could just go and start flipping burgers at a burger joint, because it's far too dangerous for somebody in a wheelchair to be behind the kitchen where there's grease. Or it's not like I could put on a hard hat and go and just start working at a construction site for the same reasons. So I was scared, much like we're all scared right now with what's going on with COVID. But it was thanks to my wife, who's been such a guiding light and so positive. And actually, on the other end of that phone, she started jumping for joy with excitement. And I was like, wait, why are you so excited? I just told you I lost my job. And she said, do you know the amount of times I just drove you to work so that you and I could spend more time together? You've been working crazy hours and I feel like I never see you. And this is your opportunity to go out and do what I think that you were meant to do for your entire life. And I said, what's that? She said, duh, I think you're meant to go out and inspire people. I think your true calling is to light a fire in people. Well, I was touched by her saying this, but I had no idea about how to start a business. Again, I was just one guy, just like me and Chris. But then I started to think about some other people who were just one guy or just one person. Guys like Rick Hansen, who started this movement of wheeling around the world in his wheelchair to raise money for spinal cord injury research in the mid-'80s. And I bet you didn't know this about Rick's movement, but it's thanks to him that here in the Lower Mainland and that we have as many curb cuts as we do, because his very first offices of his foundation after returning from the Man of Ocean tour was at the UBC campuses. And there was very little curb cuts there. So he advocated, he raised his voice, and we changed the community as a result of it. Or what about guys like Terry Fox, who ran around the country to raise awareness on cancer research? And to this day, we still have students in school running throughout their community in his namesake and in his honor to do exactly that. So in that moment, I realized that losing my job was the best thing that could ever happen to me. It started me on this whirlwind of learning about myself. What could I actually do to inspire people? Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you. When I started out in my business, I didn't want to be the guy that was pigeonholed as a guy with a disability talking about disability. Because to me, I don't know, I wanted to be respected as an entrepreneur first. And so I've always been a good people person, and people have always asked me how I'm connecting with people. And so I actually developed a system called the CUBE principle, CUBE, creatively utilize your best energy. And I actually started my business with that in mind to teach people how to make strong, intimate, and authentic connections with people in their lives to get what they want in life. That's what I started with. But I avoided the accessibility stuff like the plague. I just didn't want it to be near me because I didn't want to be, as I said, pigeonholed. Well, you can probably see in some of these photos on your screen that I actually ended up not only having a guy like Rick Hansen as a poster on my wall, but I actually ended up working with Rick as a result of the work that I was doing as a speaker. You can see my wife and I there in the bottom left corner. And we're sitting there with Rick at an event. And that very event is that changed my perception yet again about myself and what I was capable of. When I was at this event with Rick and my wife, he was the keynote speaker, but I was Rick's guest and we were there together, and he's up on stage in front of about 600-700 people or so. And in the middle of his talk, now he didn't tell me what he was going to say, but in the middle of his talk, he stops and he says, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge somebody who's with me here today. His name is Marco Pasqua, and he's sitting with me at my table. Now, I want you to know that it's thanks to guys like Marco that I feel confident that here in our country, we're going to have a stronghold and we're going to have strong leaders. And it really gives me hope knowing that guys like Marco are out there, because that means that I can officially pass the torch on to this champion movement of accessibility and inclusion to guys like Marco. Well, that's all I needed to hear in that moment, was having somebody I've looked up to my entire life tell me that he thinks that I can make a difference. And that he even told me later that it's not something to be looked down upon to be speaking on the things that we're aware of because of our lived experience. In fact, it's something that we can embrace in our lives. And so with that, I started to pursue more aspects of accessibility and inclusion and really delving my mind into that area and into that field. So much so that I got trained as an official Rick Hansen Foundation Accessibility Certified Professional, essentially somebody who can look at the built environment and the environment around us and actually be able to assess it based on accessibility from all different aspects of life, whether that's hearing, vision, cognitive, mobility, you name it, that's the training. And it's completely changed my life. So now, not only do I have this speaking ability as somebody who speaks on a world stage, but now I can actually speak about something where my purpose and my passion become combined. And I want you to think about those things, about resilience, about your mental health as we're going through what we're going through today. What can you do to combine your passion and your purpose to do something more with what you're already doing out there? And I thought to myself, are there people that are transforming the leadership and culture? And absolutely that there are. There are many business leaders, city officials, people around our province and our country who are doing amazing things to transform the leadership and culture. Andrea is definitely one of them. Okay. But I actually had an opportunity as a result of being an accessibility consultant to work on an amazing project back in 2017. It was with a group called the President's Group, or Accessible Employers. Now, this was a group that was established by the BC provincial government because they wanted to create a board of BC business leaders who were making active changes in order to create more inclusive workplaces across our province, because BC wants to be the most accessible province in all of Canada in just a short while. But they knew that in order to do that, the government, mind me saying, but they admitted they didn't really know what they were doing when it came to accessibility in the business sort of sphere. So they needed to get these business leaders throughout our province who were doing best practices that they could gather information from. And at the time, they knew they've been running since about 2013 as a board that was sharing ideas internally. But in 2017, they realized they actually needed to hire some staff in order to collect their learnings and compile them into resources that other people could learn from. And fortunately, that's when I was hired as one of only 2 lead consultants to work with all 25 companies that were on this board. Now, here's some of the companies that are on the President's Group as the main sort of consultation board. And I'm so thrilled to say that they actually have a thing called the Community of Accessible Employers that we started after I started as a consultant, so that not all companies in BC had to sit on this board necessarily and interact directly with government, but that they could take and learn the practices that these companies were teaching. And how did we do that? Well, we broke them down into bite-sized chunks and learnable pieces that everybody could learn and grow from in PDFs between 1 and 5 pages on a bunch of different topics. And you can go to the website, accessibleemployers.ca, to learn and get those resources. But I want to share with you, because now I'm no longer one of the lead consultants. I've gone to work back in my business full time for myself, but it was an amazing experience doing that for 2 years. And since I left last year as the lead consultant, there are 2 new amazing ladies who are their consultants now. And they actually created this infographic since COVID hit that I wanted to share a little bit about why hiring people with disabilities is amazing in the new normal. And I don't even like to call it the new normal. Personally, I like to call it the better normal. Okay, because I refuse to believe that we have to reshape our ideas and our life and about this new normal. I think that there's a hybrid model there that we can create. But here's some of the things that we learned while I was with the President's Group, that they've included these stats on this infographic. People with disabilities are 2 times more likely to meet and exceed financial targets, 6 times more likely to be innovative, 6 times more likely to anticipate change, because we go through change a lot, 72% higher retention, because many people with disabilities, it may be their first opportunity to work at your workplace, and they're actually taking this now in stride because you may have been the first employer to give them an opportunity. They've handed out their resume a dozen times or 100 times and haven't heard anything back. 86% better attendance, and 90% they performed equal or better than their coworkers without disabilities. And yes, these sources are sourced on the website. There is actually sources from a Deloitte study that actually collected all this information. Now, as far as COVID directly, you've heard my story earlier where I was talking about adaptability, being innovative. I used that gentleman's height because I'm vertically challenged to grab the video card down and make that change. Well, we've been training for this our entire lives, people with disabilities, being in a situation like this. We're primed to work remotely. And I'm proud to say now, many companies are primed to provide remote work now because we have the technology to do so, much like we're doing today with this conference. And many people prefer temporary or flexible or casual opportunities anyways. And so if you're able to work from home and be more casual, it's about the mindset of the employer just as much as it is about the employee being able to do the job. And of course, there's some other benefits here. The companies that were more inclusive saw an economic benefit of 2 to 7 times based on the accommodations that they provided. There's a misnomer out there that accommodations are so expensive for people with disabilities, when in many cases, most of the accommodations are $500 or below. In fact, many are easy to do, like adjusting a desk height, providing somebody with task lighting so that they can see if they have low vision, magnification software if they need things to be magnified or blown up in any capacity. For me, it was basically just removing barriers. But now that I'm working from home, I've got my microphone here, I've got my camera, I've got my monitor, I'm ready to go. So there's a lot of people that are also ready to go as well. And I think that more and more employers are starting to see that as well. And here's some things that I would recommend that you get started with if you visit accessibleemployers.ca, whether you're an employer or you're just somebody in the community who's interested about accessibility and you want to learn more. The top 4 that I would recommend, of course, is the business case that we created. The accessible recruitment checklist. This is great to look at in terms of ensuring that you know what things to look for when you're recruiting people with disabilities. Some FAQs and misconceptions around hiring people with disabilities. And then, of course, disability-related language and tips. So that would be my suggestion for getting started, but that's on accessibleemployers.ca. So why does this matter? Why is this important? Well, we share different strengths and perspectives, being people with disabilities. We help to open people's eyes up to what's possible. It changes the focus from our disability to our abilities. What are we capable of doing? What are you even doubting yourself on, whether you're a person with a visible disability or not, that you could change the focus on and show people that you're capable, more capable than they think you are. And it encourages an open dialogue. So for many of the CEOs and business leaders, after I started working with those 25 companies, they became so courageous that they were actually willing to come up and actually say, you know what, team, I haven't told anybody this, but I struggle with anxiety and depression. And I just wanted to share that with the team. And you know what happened in those CEOs and business leaders doing that, because they set the tone? They started to have lunch and learns. They started to have Slack groups where more people were talking about the importance of mental health and making sure that you're there for each other. So it's a really good experience to be able to do this. I want to encourage everyone following my talk today to make authentic connections. Get to know your community members. Get to know the people that you work with. Discover their why. Why is it that they do the things that they do? Why is it that they want to pursue the career they are? Why is it that they're involved in recreation? All of those things. Support them to reach their goals. And speaking of supporting to reach their goals, prior to COVID, I wanted to get back into competitive shape. Admittedly so, I was not happy with the person I was seeing in the mirror. I was no longer that person because I started to do a lot of desk jobs and a lot of desk work, and enough was enough. So last year before COVID, I started working again with a personal trainer named Nola. She's an incredible individual. There was only one problem. Nola had never worked with somebody with a disability before. But as it happened, before I approached her 2 weeks earlier, the city of Surrey, where I live, offered adapted recreation training, and she happened to take the course. So although she was nervous about the adaptations that we might have to make in the gym, she was open to the idea of making these adaptations and these changes. And so you can see in this photo here, and in those of you who can't, there's a photo of Nola and myself, and I'm holding and grabbing down on this bar and pulling down. And there's a 5-pound weight that's been shoved underneath my tire, because I don't know if you can tell, Nola is a small girl. She's very strong, but she's tiny. And so that's a very heavy weight that I was lifting. And we were noticing that my chair kept sliding forward every time I was pulling down on the weight. So we adapted, we changed, we put a weight in front of my tire, and that was able to make that change so that I could work out with her. And she was incredible in terms of helping me to get back into the shape that I knew I could be in. But of course, then COVID hit. And again, I had to face challenge, mental health, resiliency, all of those things. But taking what I learned from Nola about myself and about her and about fitness, yet again, I decided to adapt workouts at my house. So this is me, not a couple of months ago, trying to get back into shape because I'll admit it again. They call it COVID-19, but I'm sure you've all heard of the COVID-15, which is those extra few pounds we've been gaining at the beginning of COVID. So I wanted to make sure I didn't fall victim to that, and I continue to push myself. And so I do these adapted workouts for myself at home to continue to push forward and be strong. And so it's been an incredible experience, but I do miss Nola. So what can you do all about this? Well, if you're a team leader, as I said, set the tone from the top. Allow yourself to be vulnerable with your friends, colleagues, and staff. Provide workplace accommodations when possible. Okay, be flexible with work hours and location. If we're doing a hybrid model of some people coming into the office and some people working from home, maybe, just maybe, if you see an employee struggling, maybe they need to start at 10 a.m. instead of 9 a.m. Are there things that we can adjust as leaders to make that a possibility? I know that there is. You can be creative and still make it work and still adapt and adjust in this changing world. And for team members, be a peer mentor. Be open and welcome, okay? Check for environmental barriers. This is one of my biggest pet peeves, okay? When my wife and I went to a restaurant months and months ago before COVID, we were out at a restaurant, and I hate when they use the accessible bathroom as a storage space for things like high chairs and extra boxes. And I went to go use the bathroom, and as I wheeled up to the bathroom, I went to open the accessible door, I realized it was a bit jammed and I couldn't get in. I looked in and saw that there were boxes and chairs blocking my way of getting in. Well, I went and told the staff, excuse me, there are boxes and things blocking the entrance to this washroom. And she said to me, oh, don't worry about it, it's temporary. Well, I said to her, well, I'm a temporary customer and I'm about to leave because I really got to use the bathroom. So these are the things that I want you to consider when you're looking at your workspace. Check for potential tripping hazards or barriers that you might not other consider. But the biggest thing you can take away from all of this is just to simply ask how you can best support the person, because they're going to know themselves better than you know anything. And it's not about asking them about their disability, but literally saying, is there anything that I can do to best support you in this role to make sure that you're operating at 100%? So I want to leave you with that. And I believe that is the end of my presentation. So thank you so much, everyone. And I hope we do have a moment or two for some questions, but if not, we can answer them later. Thanks so much, Andrea and Stacy.
That was amazing, Marco. Exactly the way we wanted to get kicked off today on our OneAbility Education Day. So thank you so much. I also appreciated the kind shout out around my leadership. I think it's really important that you reference the President's Group, because it certainly is a gold standard in BC in terms of the type of work that you were initiating there and that is carrying on now. And in fact, I was just on a national conversation about it this morning. So there's
Awesome.
There's lots of stuff percolating right now. So we do want to open it up and see if anyone has any questions. As we mentioned, we can do those in the chat box, or you can jump off of mute. We have time for probably 1 to 2 questions.
Yeah, don't be shy, everybody. I was just vulnerable with you today, so I'm hoping that you'll be vulnerable as well.
Okay, I'm not getting any questions, so I'm going to ask you one.
Okay.
If you had one piece of advice for the group today in terms of like how to get started, what would it be?
Well, I would say probably take a look at your web presence, because we're doing a lot of things digitally, right? And so if your biggest thing, it's almost like a field of dreams. They say, well, if you build it, they will come. And people say to me often, well, I would have all of these accessibility things prepared if people with disabilities would apply for the jobs. And unfortunately, sorry, I'm just realizing I have some chapstick here. And unfortunately, the one thing that is really, really strange about it is that they don't realize that if you adapt or you change your presence so that you actually are advocating and say that you actually have a diversity inclusion message on your website, but also remember your social media. Employers do a lot of sleuthing of a candidate to ensure that they're not doing anything naughty outside of work hours, or that they have aligned ethics and values. But what about you as a potential candidate? Are you investing time in researching the companies themselves? Research those companies, because oftentimes the ones that are leaders in accessibility are proud to talk about it. And so they're going to share these tips and these tools with you and say, like, for example, I was hosted at Van City for the 2 years I was working for the President's Group, because the CEO was the co-chair of the President's Group. And I had seen Van City at every single community event I'd ever been at for accessibility and inclusion as a gold or platinum sponsor. So I knew I was in good company. So for anyone who's an employer, for anyone who has a recreation facility, a gym, be proactive. Don't just use a boilerplate statement of we accept all people of genders, sexuality, all these things. That's great. But also have fun with it. Be creative. Show your human side, and you'll get the people coming in and hopefully applying for jobs to work with you.
Awesome. We do have one question, and I think we'll do this one and then we'll hop to our break. So can you tell us about a time that you used the CUBE framework?
Oh my goodness, I use the CUBE principle all the time. But a perfect example of this, I'm kind of torn, because there was a time at which I used the CUBE principle and it actually landed me. And you know what? I will tell this story. It's a very quick one. It was the very first year I started my business in 2012. And actually, I was on a episode of Gene Simmons' Family Jewels. That was a show that was on A&E with Gene Simmons years ago. And he was actually in Surrey because his wife and his daughter, they have a lot of friends and things in Whistler. And she was starting a facility through the Center for Child Development, which I had physiotherapy in growing up. And so they asked me if I would be on the TV show talking about all the things physiotherapy, occupational therapy has done to help me in my life. Well, this was not going to be a opportunity I was going to miss. And so I was in a scene with Sophie, his daughter. And when we finished the scene, I said, hey, listen, I know this is going to be an out there sort of question, but I have to, utilize my ability to find strengths in other people in my community. And the strongest marketer I know in the world is Gene Simmons. Like, literally, he puts his tongue on everything. And I don't mean his actual tongue, but anyways. So I said, can he help me in terms of building out the business? I'm sure you get asked all the time, but I'm going to be courageous enough right now to say, if in the future, do you think your dad would have a moment to come speak with me? And she said, you know what? No one's ever asked me in that way before. How about right now? And I kid you not, we walked off of where we were filming. She walked me down the hallway. We walked into the green room. She knocked on the door. We walked in the green room and she opens the door and there's Jean and Shannon just sitting there eating some peanuts. And she goes, hey, Dad, this is Marco. He's a great guy. He's starting a business as a speaker. He's got this thing called the CUBE principle. He wants to talk to you about it. He wants to show you his marketing materials. Here he is. Bye. And she closes the door. And there I am sitting there. And he says to me, well, you're going to come over here and talk to me? And what I thought was going to be a 1 or 2 minute conversation ended up being a 45-minute talk about the CUBE principle, about the brand. He said, thank goodness I was a Canadian, because if I was an American, he would steal that acronym right away because it was so incredible. And he taught me a lot about body language in that moment and all these things. So that was truly incredible. But there's so many stories that I can share with in terms of giving without expectation that has helped to kind of build me up in my life. And that's just the very beginning. That was when I first started.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Acknowledgement from the person that asked the question, who's actually one of our co-chairs for OneAbility and does tremendous work in the organization she works with here in Victoria called Power to Be. So so thank you so much, Marco. It's always such a pleasure to have time with you. And I'm so grateful you said yes to this opportunity and were able to share your incredible knowledge and enthusiasm with our group today to kick us off on our Education Day. And I don't know if you're sticking around, but you're certainly welcome to join for the rest of the sessions.
Oh, no, thank you so much, everyone. And if you do want to learn more, you can go to my website, marcopasqua.com, and you can learn more. And I'd be happy to chat with you in greater detail. But Andrea, Stacy, thank you so much for thinking of me. It's always a pleasure to work with you both. And you've got such great energy. I am going to stick around a little bit because I know some of the other speakers, and I'm really interested to see how it all comes down. In fact, Richard Peter, was one of the people who really inspired me with wheelchair basketball. And Richard and I have worked together in that capacity for many, many years. So I'm really, really excited to see his chat.
Awesome. That is great. And someone's appreciating all your memorabilia and your background. I know you keep setting up your office to be funner and funner every time I see you. So
there you go. Oh, thanks so much.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to pivot from Marco's presentation to a little bit of a break, but we're actually going to start by sharing a video. And we actually had a related question just in the chat box a few minutes ago around accessible training around kind of this whole strength training area. And so we at OneAbility had done a resource a couple of years ago around modifications and adaptations for strength training for individuals with disabilities. So we're going to, we'll send that resource out in our post-event wrap-up email. So I just wanted to flag that. And then I also just wanted to acknowledge that the event today, one, is being, is through financial support from from financial support from the Victoria Foundation. And we're super grateful that we've had tremendous support from the Victoria Foundation for a number of years around the OneAbility initiative. And today is being hosted by Pisces. Normally we would have been in person in their beautiful facilities, which they've just done a whole number of accessible upgrades to, but today is online. And so we're just going to share a quick video of some of what's going on for them. So I'm going to turn it over to our video player.
Hi. I'm
Oh, hello.
Pisces.
Are you having a good time?
Yeah.
That's good.
My name is Khalil. I'm Miriam's older brother, and we are a family of 5. We are originally from Syria, and we've been living here for almost 5 years, a very happy 5 years.
What is it like going to camp with your sister?
Cool. It was cool, fun. Exercising with her is fun, running around with her, and Miriam is a very fun partner. With Miriam, basically everything is a highlight because she has a different mind every time. All the leaders had really, really fun games. Everyone's so kind to each other, and the leaders just make everything easy and fun, and they help you when you're down.
What's your favorite part about Pisces?
Everything.
At Pisces, everything is a highlight. Yeah, that's how I feel.
If you could say anything to the team at Pisces, what would you say?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And it was a very, very fun 2 years. It was a pleasure being here.
I love being here.
Amazing. Thank you, Pisces, for sharing that great video. And we're so grateful for your involvement and your support of kicking off this education day in a totally different environment this year. It's been a bit of a journey and learnings, but I think it's going pretty well so far. So we're going to give you just a couple minute break right now to maybe do a quick bio break, and we will be coming back in about 3 minutes. So quick bio break, and we will kick off our next part of our presentation. So enjoy the break.
Oh my God, this feeling's just begun. I'm saying things I've never said, doing things I've never done. Oh my God, when I see you, I should run. But I'm frozen in motion, and my head tells me to stop, tells me to stop.
Okay, tells me to get going. So here we go. We're going to kick off for the next phase of today's OneAbility Education Day, and we're going to have a panel come up and join us next. So we're going to work through a series of facilitated questions with our panelists. So I'm going to introduce and invite them one by one to come up. So first up, Carolyn Murray has just joined us. And Carolyn and I have known each other for a really long time. I feel like this is a bit of a reunion day for me with all these fun faces. Carolyn has guided many young Canadian triathletes to countless major international events, including World Championships and Paralympics. She was responsible for leading 3 para-triathletes in the sport's Paralympic debut in the 2016 Paralympic Games, which were held in Rio. And Stefan Daniel, one of her athletes, won a silver medal in the men's standing classification at those games. Her intent, perseverance, and patience and communications has resulted in numerous awards and accolades, including the 2015 Triathlon Canada Elite Coach of the Year, the Sport BC Female Coach of the Year, Triathlon Canada Elite Coach of the Year in 2016 as well, and the Petro-Canada Coaching Excellence Award in 2016 and 2019. And Carolyn was an early joiner to the OneAbility family. And as we were kind of getting our first meetings underway, she was with us. And at that point, just starting the triathlon program and very much kind of learning, like, what could she do to develop this incredible program in Canada? And here we are almost 6 years later, and you've just had such tremendous success. So welcome to today. I'm looking forward to the conversation with you. Next up, I'm going to ask Bruce Pinel to join us. Dr. Bruce Pinel he works in performance, health, and wellness fields as a practitioner in Victoria since 2001. Dr. Pinel is an inspiring, innovative, and leading practitioner and regularly consults and presents in the healthcare and performance fields relating to performance, injury rehabilitation, health and wellness, stress and adversity management, business leadership, and building resiliency. He's worked with a range of athletes and teams in world-class level at major international events. Dr. Pinel has worked with the Canadian Paralympic athletes and teams in wheelchair rugby, sailing, rowing, swimming, and sledge hockey. And we've also known each other for a really long time, since we opened Pisces, I think, back in 2008 or so. So welcome, Bruce. It's great to have you here. Looking forward to the conversation. And I also want to introduce Richard Peter, who is just having a few connectivity issues. So I'm hoping Richard's on. If not, he'll join us shortly. So I'm going to maybe introduce him now, and if we can get him on screen, then we will do so. And otherwise, we'll start with some questions for our 2 panelists and have him join right after. So Richard Peter goes by the nickname Bear. He's a Canadian First Nations basketball player. He was born in Duncan on Cowichan Tribes territory and resides in Victoria. When Richard was 4 years old, he was injured in a bus accident, leaving him in his wheelchair ever since. He began playing wheelchair basketball at the age of 15 when he was inspired by a team that came to his school and introduced him to the wheelchair sports. Since then, Richard has competed in 5 Paralympic Games, winning gold medal in wheelchair basketball for 3 of those. And last September, I had the great pleasure of seeing Richard play para-badminton at the Lima Para-Pan American Games down in Peru. And so he's a multi-talented athlete, and most of the posts I see are him out and about doing a variety of different sports. So definitely a multi-sport athlete, but yeah, great to have you join us, Bear, and super stoked for this panel today. So everyone raring to go? Yeah, perfect. Okay, so we have a variety of panel questions that we're going to work through, but we also invite questions from the audience. So if you want to put a question in the chat box, then we will weave it in as we go through this session today. So the first question I'm going to kick off with, and Carolyn, maybe we'll start with you. tell us a little bit about how you got into parasport. You were an elite triathlete yourself. Tell us about your journey to get here.
Thanks, Andrea. Thanks, everyone, for having me. I can't believe it's been 6 years since I started the role of para head coach. So as Andrea mentioned, I was a national team athlete myself, competed in Beijing, and then went on quickly to coach at a development level and had no para experience whatsoever. Was asked if I was interested in the role, and it just came at the right time. And I said, sure, I don't know what I'm doing and I'm going to need a lot of help, and jumped in with 2 feet and haven't looked back since. And I think it was really, really cool listening to Marco. A lot of his comments resonated with me. It was asking questions, being open-minded, and that's where I've gotten to. And you know, going to Rio, of course, was a highlight. That was the first time ParaTriathlon was in the games, so it was really special to be part of that. And then now continuing on, looking towards Tokyo.
Awesome. Thank you for that great introduction. Bruce, over to you. Tell us a little bit about your entry point into particularly the parasport world.
Okay, thanks. And it is great to, I'll start with seeing all the different names. I scrolled through the pages here, and so many familiar names and people I've crossed paths with over the years. And it's great to see people there. My entry point actually came through rowing with the adapted rowing program at Rowing Canada. I started working with the Rowing Canada national team in preparation for 2008 Olympics in Beijing, and with that involved being working with the adapted rowing program, and it was fantastic, and really enjoyed the experience with them. And part of it is, and a lot of people don't necessarily know this, I can't bend my left arm. I actually have a permanent disability in my left arm, but most people don't know that about me. And when I got involved with that team and I was doing something, and I made a comment, oh, I can't actually grab that and move that for you right now. And I explained why. They started making fun of me for being for having a disability. The parasport athletes are mocking me, and I thought, okay, we're good now. We can go with this. And it was just it suddenly became a community. And so with that, I got involved with it, and then it just led to lots of other experiences, and was introduced to the wheelchair rugby family, which is an incredible family in Canada as well. And that happened just after the Beijing Olympics, and from there just started working with a number of the adaptive sports or parasports throughout the years, and love it, absolutely love it.
Awesome. Yeah, you quickly get adopted into the parasport family, I find. Everyone's just so welcoming. Richard, I'm going to turn it over to you. Tell us a little bit about your injury and then how you ended up in parasport, and then a trajectory to Paralympics, multiple Paralympics.
Thanks, Andrea. Yep. Hopefully the internet and everything works well for me here at home. But yes, I guess first I'll talk a bit more about how I got injured and how I got involved into sport. I was actually hurt as a young child. So I was going to school. One benefit that my mom was the teacher at the school, at the preschool. So that was a benefit that I got in a bit early, I guess. So one day, got dropped off from school just in front of home. But being a young kid, I was only 5 years old, just turned 5 actually. And, you know, being a kid, I didn't want to go home quite at the moment. I still wanted to go play and have fun with my friends. The only problem was that all my friends were still on the school bus that I just got dropped off from. So without thinking of my own personal safety, I tried to run and catch up to the bus. You know, being a young kid, I'm sure any parents that are out there, you know, I've had some of those scares that your kid, sometimes you don't know what your kid's going to do. And so I chased and ran up to the bus, and obviously I was a very good athlete. I caught up to the bus, but the bus driver didn't see me running behind him. And I actually got very lucky that day, and that he backed up to drop off one of my friends just down the road. And he actually backed up, didn't see me behind him, and ran right over my chest. And I got very lucky that day that actually I fell into a puddle. And so that's the only reason and the only way I survived. And also with the quick thinking of my good friend that just got dropped off from the bus. Also, he actually saw this happen and came out and pulled me out from under the bus. And again, the bus driver didn't see anything, notice anything that happened. And so he drove on and finished the rest of his route. And my father, who was at home waiting for me, saw this all happen and quickly grabbed me, and we went up to the hospital, and I guess that started my SCI journey. So I think very similar to Marco, that growing up with a disability, I think that really does make you see a lot of the different challenges, a lot of the different, I guess you learn a lot more different tricks, with Marco talking about with how his first job there, and, just working with the person that he was working to had to reach up and grab his own piece of equipment that was up on top shelf. I mean, we still do that today, going shopping or doing whatever. If we need a little bit of assistance, then we just work, have to work our best charms and try to get out there and get some assistance there. And so you learn a lot of those different skills through a lot of different challenges that we have, from going to school and everyday life. I think that was probably one of my benefits too, that I grew up on the island. I grew up in Duncan, Cowichan tribes. And so the majority of the buildings and schools that I went to were never wheelchair accessible, because this was back in the late 70s, early 80s. And so accessibility was a different story back then as it is today. So it was definitely a few challenges. I think every school that I went to, mainly the first couple of weeks or first month, every school had to be adapted to be made accessible for me to attend classes. And so that was always a bit of the challenge there too. And so I think the teachers and everybody else sort of got to know that, well, I might be a little bit late getting to class, whether it's taking the lift up to the second floor or, just making sure everything is accessible. So there's always a bit of a challenge there. But that was one big thing that I think I grew up with, that I said, no, I don't want anybody to see, my wheelchair, which is one thing that everybody has noticed first. And so I would always sort of put myself forward and say, well, hold on, I'm Richard. Yes. Very similar to the talk earlier that, a lot of people will say, no, sorry, you can't do this. And I'm like, hold on, I've always got that little chip on my shoulder, as I always mention, that, nope, yes, I can do this. And here, I'm going to show it to you. And very similar to Marco, that, I had a lot of teachers and great family and great friends that I always tried to make everything adaptable. And so that was always very great for me. So I was always included with a lot of different sports and a lot of different programs and things that we did with the family and the community. So I never really thought much about parasport. Of course, I did hear about this young guy that was wheeling around the world, and occasionally I'd be wheeling around, Duncan, or going to school or just going into town, and somebody like, oh, hey, Rick, how's the wheel going? And I'm like, hold on, I don't know that person. And then they were, of course, referring to Rick Hansen, who's wheeling around and just making a small joke that, yeah, you learn to laugh about and so on. So it was pretty funny. And so that's how I learned about what Rick was doing. But I'd still never really heard about parasport. I actually got my first involvement in parasport was with a Victoria Wheelchair Sports Club. They'd actually heard about this young kid that was up in Duncan. And so they came up and did a basketball demo at my school. And actually at that time, I was like, no, I don't want to go. That's nothing for me. But, very luckily, I finally was persuaded to go give it a try. And so I said, sure, I'll go give it a try. And then I really enjoyed it. I just loved wheelchair basketball. I'd actually never really played much basketball, but I just enjoyed having a sport that I could really excel at. I think the benefits that I played sports with my family and friends, and they were all running and jumping. So that actually pushed me hard to try to keep up with them. And so that made it sort of an easy transition when I got into parasport. And so that's where I really enjoyed it. I mean, even to this day, as you mentioned, with trying a new sport, let's say like badminton, that I just enjoy all kinds of sports. That's one thing I would always say, that I'm never really just a basketball player. I just enjoy all kinds of sports and also introducing sports, like Marco mentioned, I'll be there to help try to introduce basketball, but any sport, whether it be tennis, athletics, badminton, there's, hand cycling is a big thing that I do now too. And so there's a lot of different opportunities that are out there, and just nowadays technology is making everything accessible. So that's definitely a few different benefits there. And so that's how I got introduced into basketball, was this demo team came to my school. And then I guess you could say the rest is history. And then I've continued on and played basketball. Once I decided to make that next step, that I was enjoying it, just playing it for fun and enjoyed traveling. And then I had a chance to say, all right, well, if I want to make it to the next level, that I would eventually have to move to Vancouver, because that's where the majority of activities were based in the SCI community was Vancouver had a lot of the different programs and opportunities there, and so that was definitely a big challenge. And you know, hats off to let's say wheelchair sports and Victoria Wheelchair Sports and wheelchair basketball. They've always been there to help out. Like as coming from a low-income family, it was definitely hard to find wheelchair and equipment, and so that was definitely a big challenge too. And so they had a loan program that would loan out wheelchairs, and so that made it much easier for me to, you know, whether I got my first basketball chair and then athletics chair too. I did athletics, you know, was my, I guess, sort of my first sport, and then I gravitated towards team sports, and basketball was the best one for me at that time. And so I've enjoyed, yeah, I just enjoy all kinds of sports, and I'm sure we can answer many things more later.
Awesome. Thank you. Carolyn, I'm going to come back to you. Tell us about some of your key learnings around parasport as you've sort of gone through this journey.
Okay, there's lots, and they're still ongoing, for sure. So I think probably the biggest learning is that it's okay to ask for help when it comes to equipment and extra resources. Like that's probably one of the differences, is that you do need more help when you're working with parasport, whether it is with equipment or just getting assistance. So that's not my nature to ask for help. So I think learning to do that was something that I figured out pretty early on, that I did need a team. And I think the other piece, it wasn't necessarily learning, but just something to share, that there isn't a huge difference. They're all athletes, and we're adapting things, but on the able-bodied side, you're also adapting things for each individual. So on that side of things, it's really not that big of a difference. Probably the biggest difference is I think the community is really, really strong and stronger on the parasport side. And I was surprised at how open to sharing across countries, across organizations. And I know we'll talk about OneAbility a little bit later, but everyone's just open to sharing. And I think it confirmed my hope and thought that, you know, kindness and success can actually coexist. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And that has been showcased absolutely. So those are probably like the first couple, and I'm still learning. So you can ask me again in 6 years and I'll have another 6 more things to share.
That's awesome. How about you, Bruce? Tell us a little bit about your learnings about parasport over time.
Thanks, Andrea. So I think one thing that's really probably the most important thing I've learned, and I don't say I learned this, it reinforced what I believed to be true when I got in, is that it's still performance. It's still a performance environment. And whether it's at a youth level or like a recreational youth participant level, or whether it's at the elite levels at the Paralympics, performance is still the focus. The people involved want to perform. The athletes, they're athletes first. And all it does is create, maybe there's different conditions or different things, and then creativity starts taking over. How do you do this then? How do you deal with managing from a physiology perspective or a strength conditioning perspective or a team play perspective, or adapting the apparatus or things? Creativity starts dominating things, which is just fascinating discoveries and discussions around that. So I think the key thing is performance. It is a performance environment, and that is a very important aspect, and that's why they compete. That's why they get involved. They like to just be involved. It's the best part. I also noticed one of the things that was really fascinating was my first trip to the Paralympics and going into the village was how fascinating it was of the feel of inclusivity. And it's actually a different feel from the village at the Olympics. Again, performance is still the dominant theme, but the inclusivity and the acceptance and the curiosity that exists in the village, it was fantastic. And to see all these people all these athletes who have a shared focus on being elite and world class, also being very curious about each other, about other sports, about other adaptations, how people are doing things, and to be in those discussions and see the celebration that can go on. So performance was a key focus, but the inclusivity and also the recognition and celebration of other people's successes, like other athletes when they succeeded, even against you or in other sports, just recognizing excellence where excellence was. It's just, when you see excellence, it's excellent. It doesn't matter if it's your country or not. It's just that there's a much better feel in the Paralympic Village around that. Also, something that I learned pretty quickly is be willing to jump in and help, but don't help unless it's really asked. And so with the athletes, when they arrive at a camp, for example, they've done everything to get there, whether they're wheelchair athletes or other athletes. They've done everything to get there, and now they're in the camp, and then maybe there's stuff happening or a training environment. Be available, even if it's not my job. I think Carolyn on the list too, and Bear on the list. People do a lot of stuff that are outside their prescribed roles in the Paralympic environment or in the parasport environment, and that's perfect. That's what makes it fun. That's what makes it a family. And so learning, being ready to do anything as needed, and but also asking before you do something. Don't assume someone needs help or assistance, and also if they do, they will ask. But being available is very important. And that's been, I guess, some of the key learnings. And as Carolyn mentioned, there's still a lot of learning. I mean, I'm constantly blown away by how did you do that? How can you do that so well? It's just incredible how effective and competent and skilled something is. I'm just fascinated. I learn more every day that I'm in that environment, which is really rewarding.
Awesome, thank you. And over to you, Richard. I'm going to ask you a slightly different question. You have transitioned between sports in the Paralympic world and parasport world. What is some of your journey felt like in terms of learning about those sports? And I'm gonna kind of fine tune it a little bit. What is sort of that piece that gives you the confidence to transition between sports and to try new things? Like, what are a couple pieces that you could share that might support others to either try something different or to support an athlete to do something different?
Whenever I talk to either new athletes or even just new SCI members, one of the biggest things is, especially after incurring your injury, it's, I always say that's just a little speed bump. And now you had your first journey, and now you're onto your second part of your journey of your life, and it's always a challenge, but it also depends on the way you view it. For sports, that's one thing that's been good and bad at times, and that I just love all sports, and that's one of the biggest things. I said, all right, well, if you do love whatever your passion is, whether it be with work or school or education or, any activity, I say, well, that's what you enjoy doing, then get out there and enjoy it and keep, do your best to enjoy it as much as possible. That's what I always said too. Once I would finally retire, I was like, well, once it became more of once I didn't fully love it as much as I used to when I was younger, I was like, all right, now maybe it's time to retire. And mainly my body said, all right, it's time to retire. And so it was, my body was telling me to slow down, but I did it as much as possible. And that's sometimes tough now too, even with badminton. I'm like, all right, I can help out as much as possible, as much as my body will allow me. Just with a few injuries that I've incurred through many years of the Paralympic level and training, and so my body is a little bit worn down. And so that's one of the tough things too, that to try to push my body a little bit more to keep going. But like I've always told a lot of different coaches, and just said, all right, well, hey, as a few of the other panelists mentioned too, that, with the parasport athletes, it's always the challenge that everybody living with an SCI, that everybody, you see those challenges every day, and everybody has different solutions to it. And I think it's, I always say it's the different pair of glasses that you put on once you do encounter an SCI, that you'll see things differently. With how Marco was talking earlier with work, I mean, one of the big challenges to it is that realistically you should put any employer and let them live a day or a couple days or a week with a disability, put them in a wheelchair, blindfold them for a day, and say, all right, now let's see how accessible your workspace is and see how accessible the washroom is, accessible how the front door is, whether there's always a flight of stairs, and that the wheelchair entrance is always around back or around the side, or I've gone into restaurants where I've had to enter through the kitchen. And so that's always a bit of a challenge there too. And so there's many different sort of road bumps that are always out there. And so with sports, I always say, well, sometimes people will say, all right, well, this is the sport I love. All right, this is how it can be adapted, and this is how you can enjoy it. But there have been also other times where I'll say, all right, well, I know that's the sport you love, but maybe you should try this avenue. And that you can hopefully succeed as much as possible around this route. Because I'm sure there's been, let's say, some athletes who, let's say, are quadriplegic, and they're like, oh, I love basketball, but wheelchair rugby might be the better option, or athletics or swimming, and say, well, here, let's try this, and there might be a bit more success there. And so that's definitely one of the, I guess, like I said, one of the smaller road bumps that some people will see, and I'll say, right here, let's try to direct you around that. It's never a roadblock. I always say it's just a little speed bump that it might be a bit of a hindrance, but you still can manage your way around it, and hopefully get the right path to success.
Awesome. Tell me, I'm going to stay on you for a minute. Richard, so your journey around keeping yourself mentally healthy as you've navigated your sport journey. And so maybe just give us a few pointers around sort of how you've navigated your own mental health.
Let's say, that's which direction shall we go here now? Let's say when I first started. So when I first got into sports, it was great. I'd say wheelchair sports opened so many doors for me. Me living in, on reserve back on the island in a small town, I was the only kid with a disability there. Or sorry, Marco, should I say handicap? But I was the only kid back then in a chair, and so it was definitely a challenge to be included and succeed. And so para sport really opened so many doors for me, and I was like, wow, this is great. Get to travel around, meet new people, meet new cities. But financially, it was a big challenge for me and my family. And so we did a lot of fundraising, had a lot of assistance from Cowden tribes, from my family back home, and even the city too. They always helped out whenever they could too, and make it so that I can attend some of these different events and sports. And so once I got started, then the first sort of small barrier too was, racism, and that being the only First Nations kid also coming out. And that was a bit of a challenge at times where I'd get involved and they're like, oh, who's this new guy? But because I was, I guess, athletically gifted, so I did, I guess, rose to success pretty quickly and adapted to each sport. I'm like, oh, I like this. And I adapted to just about any sport that we tried. And so there was a bit of a pushback at times from whether it be other athletes or, other people. And so there was a bit of a challenge. And I do recall that, when I first got involved in basketball too, got a bit of racism there and a few, backlashes there. And actually I went back home and I was like, all right, luckily I was able to talk to one of my family members, my grandfather. And I sort of talked to him and said, he sort of noticed that something was wrong. I'd always go see him all the time, good and bad. And I think he noticed that I was down one day. He's like, oh, what's the matter? And he's like, well, just went to a tournament, basketball trip, and got a lot of trouble. And I think I'm going to quit. I don't really want to play anymore. And so he had a really good chat with me, and his view was great. And, that's sort of the way I view things now too. And that he sort of mentioned, said, all right, well, yeah, what happened? I said, oh yeah, I got a bit of racism, and that does happen. Being a minority, there's always a lot of challenges here and there. And so he's like, all right, well, you can quit. That's all right. That's okay. If that's your choice, that's your choice. But he said to me, do you like playing sports? I'm like, yeah, it's great. I love playing sports. And then he put it point blank and said, well, are you going to allow him to take that away from me? And so that's one thing that I stuck with then. I was like, all right, that's true. I love playing sports, and I'm not going to let anybody else take that away from me. And so that was one of the biggest things that, like I said, really stuck with me. And that's what I try to promote out too. It was like, if you guys really do enjoy what you want to do, then don't let anything stop you, and just keep on doing it. And if you've got a love of sport, love of work, love of family, just make it happen. Where there's a will, there's a way. So that was one of the first challenges there.
Yeah.
And so I've always had a bit of that challenge. There's always been something in the back of my mind. I mean, there's always a few, like I say, roadblocks here and there. I think coming from a small town, moving into the big city and getting into sport, that was a big challenge for me also. And so at first, me and my family were a couple cousins and friends were going to move to Vancouver. I said, all right, I want to go try to reach that next level for wheelchair basketball. So I said I had to move to Vancouver. In the end, my family everybody backed out and I moved to Vancouver by myself. So that was actually a big challenge for me too. And that I was like, all right, this is the first time moving to the big city. And it was a bit of a challenge. But luckily I still said, all right, well, this is the choice, the path that I'm on now. And I want to succeed with sport. And so this is what I had to do to go to that next level. So, I think living with an SCR or as an athlete too, going to different towns, different communities, there's always a lot of those challenges. And so I've been very thankful with all the support from my family, my community back home that said, all right, well, Richard, this is the path that you're on, continue with it. And so I've always had a lot of support to get me to where I am today. And that's what I'm always very thankful. And so once I got into sport, then yeah, same thing with support from wheelchair sports, wheelchair basketball. They've always helped me succeed. And so that's always been, made things a bit smoother.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, and appreciate your vulnerability around sharing experiences with racism as well as disability. That's an interesting intersection to navigate. I just want to, you keep saying SCI, so just so that everyone in the audience knows that spinal cord injury. So as we reference that going forward, just so everyone's aware of our acronym world. So I'm going to turn it over to Carolyn and ask you about how you support the mental health of your athletes and what that kind of looks like for your team.
Thanks, Andrea. So I'm really fortunate. I have an amazing support team that works with me. So I do have a mental performance consultant that works alongside the program. So she's a huge part of that. And specifically during this time, we definitely are making it a priority, even more so because this past year has been quite a challenge with the disappointment of a postponement of games and a lot of time alone. And training is obviously completely changing all the time, and there's so much uncertainty. So we've really tried to keep our communication open and often, and not making any assumptions. I think the athletes I work with are very resilient, which is fantastic, but being sure that they're not just putting on a brave face and actually struggling. So I think the first part of that was establishing trust, which we do have within the group. Fortunately, it's taken, it takes a bit of time and you don't assume that you have that, but the athletes I work with have a really strong sense of trust. So we can have an open dialogue and I can ask some of those hard questions to just make sure that everything is going okay. And they also reach out to each other, which is really important, that they have each other to support. And so we've had group sessions every month with the athletes to just be together, and we have a topic, but the main thing is to help them realize that there's other people in the same position, and it's okay to feel, especially this year, some disappointment, and sometimes it's hard to voice that because it is sport and there's bigger things happening right now. So for them to be in a safe place that they can communicate any challenges they're going through has been a big piece of it. And I think the other piece this year is looking back at the why. So I know Marco referenced that in his presentation, and that's been a big key piece for mental health on our side of why do you do this? And it has come back for all the athletes because they love the sport. It's not just because, they're wanting to win medals or they're going to get attention, and having to have a deeper dive to figure that out actually has been really valuable. And I do believe that's helped their mental health. But the big thing is that they support each other and they are a team. And then of course their extended community with their family and friends are always there. But I think not making any assumptions has been really important, because of not just saying, yeah, I'm okay, and then carrying on. We're always checking in on each other.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Bruce, I'm going to go to you. I mean, this is part of kind of your role within teams and supporting athletes, looking at their mental health and mental performance. So I'm going to pivot to see what your answer is for this one.
Great, thanks, Andrea. Now, Carolyn was right on the money. There's a lot of things she talked about in there, and the person who works with her team does a great job as well in this, which is great. Key things are I guess trust is a huge one, and trust comes by having a safe environment, an environment where, and it's a term I've used a few times now when I chat about a family, and when you have a family environment or a sport that actually prioritizes the individual is the priority, not the performance is the priority. It allows us, in using some of Carolyn's words, a deeper dive into the meaning behind it. And it's not easy. It's not an easy environment in high performance, because I find athletes can sometimes very quickly, athletes and administrators and coaches and everyone can get really wrapped up into the performance side of it as being the most important aspect. But when people are struggling and don't feel comfortable or supported in that environment, their performance is going to suffer. So it's if you keep pushing the performance focus, you actually are going to lose your athletes anyways. And so having an environment that is that's open, it's an environment that's safe. It's an environment that it's okay if someone comes to me with certain things. There are some areas I can have the conversation with, but I'm also very clear that we need more help on this. This is something that I'm not qualified or able to handle on my own, and so it might involve reaching out to other members of the IST, the integrated support team around a sport, or into the community, into their, in terms of connecting up with family doctors, community resources, or other resources that they may have through family plans. Like if a younger athlete, mom or dad may have an extended health plan that covers additional resources, is knowing what's out there for them, but also not being afraid to have the conversation. Being okay to have a conversation, to normalize it, and that this is a pretty common experience for athletes who are striving and under pressure, and that's okay. Doesn't mean I have to answer it right away or have a solution, but the critical point is that they were open and felt safe enough to come and speak to myself, speak to me about it. I don't have to have all the answers, but I have to help them find the resources they need. And again, going back to my earlier point, if you value the individual more than you value the performance, then it's an environment that can work. Interesting, when I look back at there's a lot of stress in the world, a lot of things are going on outside of the sport, and sport for many people, able-bodied or people with disabilities, sport is a place that they want to go to. It's an area they choose to go to, they want to invest in, whether it's at the recreational level or the elite level, high performance. It is what they do by choice, right? There's a lot of things we do in our daily living that we have to do, whether it's go to school or go to our jobs. But when they go to their sport, that is a place that's based on passion and love for what they do, the enjoyment of it. And you start realizing if that's an area that is now being compromised, that's becoming the stressor, or that's starting to have implications that go beyond, then we need to slow things down and take a temperature check. And it's when you kind of take perspective on stuff, some people can get pretty overwhelmed by some, in the big picture, not necessarily some huge issues. like a delayed trip or a cancellation of something. You're choosing to be in the sport. You love being in the sport. You've invested time into it. And also everyone else who's in your sport is probably dealing with similar setbacks or challenges as well. So let's normalize that, and let's take the temperature down, and let's find some resources. Let's kind of situate it in the bigger picture and keep sport a place that's fun. Keep sport a place that's safe, a place where they belong and can still excel, while still managing challenges outside.
Safety and belonging, two of my favorite words in the sports system. We're going to stay there, actually. So I'm going to stay on you, Bruce. In fact,
Okay.
you raised them. What do you think we need to do to support people showing up as they are so that they have safe experiences and they do feel like they belong? We are in a year like no other that has really shone a light on a number of social justice topics. And, you know, we heard from Richard earlier that he's faced racism in his sport experience. We know there's continued discrimination on a whole variety of identifying factors across our sports system. So how do we create those safe spaces? How do we start?
Okay, that's a massive question. That's almost an entire other conference, isn't it? And I'm happy as well
Another conference.
I'm happy for Bear and Carolyn to jump in here as well. But a lot of the stuff around creating safety and belonging, there's two areas that's going to happen. One, it's going to be driven by the participants themselves, like the association, the club, like the people actually competing or playing the sport. That's one element, but that's kind of micro of it. The macro is the structure behind it, the programming, and the accessibility to prioritize and recognize the value this offers in people's lives. And remember, if I go back to what I said a little bit earlier, this is a place when it comes to sport, recreation, activity, leisure pursuits, anything we're doing, those are a choice. And those are things we love to do. We want to invest our time. And so I think at an administrative level, one of the things I've served on some boards, some community sport boards, is coming back to a question when you're making decisions at a board level or at a level or overseas an organization, is always coming back to what is the mission statement? What are we here for? What are we here for? So if you're making decisions around planning, around funding, around scheduling, around equipment purchase, around whatever you're doing, is the decision being made in a way that actually benefits the membership, not a small group of the elite who are aspiring for the top? And because not everyone wants to be an Olympian or a Paralympian, not everyone wants to be that. They just want to be in sport. They want to be in activities, they want to be in recreation, they want to be active lifestyles. And so coming back to a question, maybe a big hot topic, like, is this serving our membership, our mission statement? Right? Is the mission statement of organization to produce Paralympians if you're at a community sport level? I don't think it is. It's inclusivity, it's access, it's programming, it's resources for the community. So if you're making decisions, always come back to the big picture. Who are we serving? Like who actually represents our membership, and are our decisions we're making reflecting that need? And if I look at some other sports I work with, that's sometimes it gets lost because sport, high performance sport, and I'll use this term in a whatever way. High performance is a very sexy topic. Everyone loves high performance. Everyone loves it. They want to talk about that, but it actually represents, I don't know the numbers, but it represents a very, 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 very small fraction of our population. And people get involved in sport and recreation aren't, as I mentioned, they're not all aspiring to be that level. They just want to be competent in something and enjoy being involved and participating and have somewhere to go that gives them an escape from their day, escape from what's outside the world. So if sport's not providing that because it's not programmed that way, then we need to step back and look at that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, high performance by design is meant to exclude people that can't perform at that level, right? So when we're looking at our systems, we've in many cases kind of forgotten about the masses that we're here to support around participation. So it becomes a bit of a challenge.
Actually, I'll touch on that a bit too, Andrea. And mainly sort of coming from sort of both ends of it. Not that I'm a coach now, but I'm always helping out new athletes and introducing sport. For me as a new athlete, I do recall that was one of the benefits of, I think Carolyn mentioned earlier with working with your own peers. And for me, like I said, growing up as the only kid with a disability when I was younger and then getting involved in a parasport, that was a great outlet for me that I'm like, all right, I can find other athletes and other people that have got similar disabilities and similar injuries. And so that was great for me because I was a teenager. I was learning loads of things, learning loads of things right then and there. And so I got so much information from all the guys on in any of the sports on what to do, even just to travel. I'm like, oh, do I need to bring, whether it be a shower bench or a raised toilet seat or all my supplies with me? And then I'd see other athletes that, travel with half as much. And they're like, oh no, you don't need all of that stuff. If you can manage to jump around, then you can make this happen. I think one of my first trips, the hotel room was not wheelchair accessible. It was, I guess, a normal hotel room. But then that's where you adapt and you make sure that, all right, well, this is still semi-accessible and this is how we adapt. And so I learned so much through all the different peers that I'd met through sport. But then, just with Bruce, how he was just talking about with athletes, and yes, I was the same, that I just love sport and love to get out there. But I also noticed that with a few of the coaches that did realize, I guess, some of my potentials, because I do the same, that I'll try to introduce sport and make sure that everybody enjoys it and has fun. Because all right, if you're not your first day at some new sport that you're doing, then you're not going to pursue it. So that's where I always try to say, all right, let's try to make sure that everybody has fun and tries to get included and enjoy it as much as possible, which I always just went out there and had a lot of fun. And then with a few coaches and a few teammates, it's, well, actually, Richard, you can do a bit more. Like for me, being on the national team, that was never on my scope. That was never one of my goals. I'm like, no, I'm just enjoying having fun. I'm just enjoying traveling. I'm just enjoying playing sports, just having a good time, which maybe I have too much fun in the sport and also outside of the sport. I'm sure that's one thing that I'm known for, is wherever I'm playing, whether it be recreational or sometimes even in the gold medal match, that I'm out there smiling and having a good time, either at my expense or my teammates' expense or the opponent's expense. And so that's always good and bad. Maybe that's one of my cues too, just how to deal with some of the pressures, is to make sure to have a good time. And that's the one thing that I always view, that, all right, if there's a lot of pressure, then I'll say, well, let's make this as easy as possible. So with a lot of coaches that I did push me to that next level, I think that was one of the big things too. Bruce sort of talked about that. It's hard to say, all right, yes, this is the high performance level, this is the recreational level, this is the competitive level. And then you've got to, as a coach, it's tough to sort of push some of those athletes to that next step, that next level. And there's always that one sort of fence that, all right, either they're going to push to the next level and get over that first hurdle, or whether they stop there and say, oh, this is where I'm going to stop. And that's the big thing. That's, maybe that's why I never got into coaching. I know that's always a bit of a challenge to push that next athlete to that next level. And because I do the same, I do see some good things in different athletes and say, all right, here, you can do a bit more. And so that's definitely, I know it's a bit of a challenge, but with a few of the different sport groups that are here online too, that there's always one of the different benefits. And I think that's also a benefit right now with technology, that any sport is now adaptable. And like, that's why I can't say that, oh, Marco, you're a great athlete, get involved in basketball, which there was a smaller amount of sports that were available back then, but now there's just about any activity can be adapted. And so that's why I always do say, well, all right, what do you love? Here, let's see how adaptable that is, and see if you can get back into it and get back to doing what you love.
Awesome. We are getting close to the end of our time, and we haven't had any questions from the audience. So I'm going to ask you about one each, more questions, I think. We'll just see how our time is. But Carolyn referenced this earlier in the presentation around sort of that opportunity to work together. And so, we kind of kicked off with Carolyn talking about some of her journey into parasport and learnings along the way. So, we're in a pretty unusual year, hopefully unusual. Hopefully this isn't foreshadowing to what every year is going to be like going forward. But, how have you learned from others? What's the importance of connecting and collaborating? And we'll start with you, Carolyn, since you kind of got us on this topic early on.
Thanks, Andrea. So as you mentioned, back in the early days of OneAbility coming together, I received an email to see if I would be interested. And honestly, like, as I said at the beginning, I had no experience working in parasport. I really didn't know what I was in for. And so I was welcome to any knowledge from anyone. And so for sure, that was such a great environment because it was welcoming, and you know, things that I maybe thought about or worried about were not really anything to worry about, because was maybe saying the wrong thing or making mistakes, that kind of thing. And so having an environment like that, where it was an open conversation about what each organization was doing, and just having a sense of community, gave me such peace of mind. And although maybe the trajectory I was trying to go with the athletes was different, it, you know, a lot of these were community programs and getting involved. The challenges are the same. And, you know, we're just trying to support athletes in their, whatever they're trying to do. And so it doesn't have to be a connection with high performance environment. I think for me, starting out in that way was really great. And I just felt supported and knew that if I had questions on some of these questions that I'm like, I should know the answer, but I don't know. I don't know a lot. I haven't worked and I haven't been in someone's shoes who has a visual impairment, which were most of the athletes I worked with at the beginning. So just to be able to ask the questions that I feel like I should already know was fantastic. And then from there, I reached out to other parasport coaches, and right away they were like arms open, excited to answer any questions and be involved. And I still have great relationships with them. And then now I'm more involved with coaches internationally. And it's all the same, because we don't have all the answers, and we can be definitely stronger together. And like I said before, I think that is unique on the parasport side, where there's much more openness to sharing. We're not hiding our information so that no one else can have an advantage. In my experience, it's been wide open from the community level up to the top international with our competitors. So I'm going to continue using those resources, because even in 20 years, if I'm still involved, I'm still not going to have all the answers. And why not use our community support to do that?
Awesome. How about you, Bruce?
I think I would agree entirely with Carolyn's answer as well. I think in my position and my role and my experiences, what I like about that is I recognize I don't have all the answers, but I do have the ability to be an advocate and to ask the questions and to be confident to do those questions and to help to work with others. Like if something I don't see, not to turn a blind eye or I can't understand, not to go, oh, I don't know how to deal with that, is to say, okay, we can work on this. I don't know what we can do, so let's ask some questions and kind of push. And I believe Marco referenced the Field of Dreams. I think it was Marco, maybe it was Richard. I can't remember who. It was said earlier on at some point. It was, if you build it, they will come. And part of my thinking sometimes is, if you come, they will build it. If you come with a problem, come with a question, come with an inquiry that's justified, it's substantiated, it's needed, then you go to the right people and they can help build it. But having that network's important, and knowing who to go to. And again, coming in when I was younger, I didn't know who that network would be, and over time built that network. And it involves leaning on people, talking to people, like connecting with yourself and your others. Is I don't know the answer, but I know who might. And but we have a question, and so let's find somebody who can help build it for us.
Awesome. And Richard, how about you? You've told us a lot today about kind of your journey, and so a short piece on sort of how relying on your network has been important.
Well, a little opposite to the others that I'll say, yes, I have all the answers. But actually, no, it's the same as just what Bruce was talking about too, that, yeah, there's a lot of different people that are out there. Even I just noticed one of the questions from Jessica V. Sorry, I'm not going to challenge your last name, but she's an OT, and just, yeah, get out there. Social media is much easier nowadays, that you can do a search and find whether an athlete that's local or a coach that's local, or also maybe that somebody's quite a distance away, but then with social media or the internet, that you can connect with them and find out what's going on. And even now that there are a few, strength and conditioning coaches that are writing some books and some information that is online. So there's definitely a lot of different opportunities that are out there. for me, yeah, when I first got involved, it was, like I said, it always just opened a lot of different doors that I could get out there and just enjoy what I wanted to try, and just finding out more about equipment and sport, and then all different disabilities. I think I owe a lot of credit to Easter Seal camps. If anybody knows what those are, that when I was younger, before I got involved into parasport, that I get involved into Easter Seal camps, and I was like, all right, I want to go and again find more peers that are similar to me. And it was a bit of a challenge that everybody that was there, there was a few people, but we all had many different disabilities, and so that was the big challenge for me. And so that was the fun thing, that I think that's where I learned how to include everybody. I said, all right, here, let's play hockey. And I said, this is how we're going to include everybody. And so that was one of the big things that I wanted to do. Maybe my love of sport said, here, let's do this and let's try to include everybody. And that was, a big challenge. And I guess that helped me. I think growing up as a young child with a disability, that you do learn to see a lot of those challenges and learn a lot of those different solutions, and just to see things. And I think that's one of the big things that help you succeed in later in life. And that's one of the things that I really enjoyed doing. Yeah.
All right. Well, we have run down our time clock today, as always happens. Such great discussion. The time goes really fast. So I want to really thank and applaud our three panelists for being here, and for the incredible work you're doing in the parasport system, and for being a voice and an advocate and incredible athlete bear. And we're just really grateful that you could join us today to share your experiences. So let's do a virtual round of applause. Miss the applause days. So yeah, we're going to take a short break. I think Pisces is going to play one more video for us during our break, but we're going to come back at 10 past 11 to kick us off for our final segment of the day. So over to Pisces to play a video.
Anasa Asnisam. My name is I am Ganau Daniel Young Mercer. I am Nishka and Gitsan ancestry.
Hello everyone, Chiaka and Squeshed. My name is Tiffany Adams. I'm a member of the Lytton First Nation.
Hi everyone, my name is Amanda DeFay and I'm a member of the Métis Nation of British Columbia.
Hey everybody, Mariah Robinson here from the Numgis First Nation.
Fit Nation home workouts are almost ready. Are you?
Fantastic. And part of the reason we wanted to share that video is that Richard Peter is going to be trained in Fit Nation in the next few weeks. And iSpark is joining us today. Many of their leaders, and Alec Nelson, as we spoke about earlier, works very closely.
Can tell
as a puppet, moving so phenomenally. You're more like the way we rock it, so don't stop. Under the lights when everything goes, nowhere to hide when I'm getting you close. When we move, well, you already know. So just imagine.
Okay, everyone, welcome back. We are in the home stretch of our session today and looking forward to having our final presenter bring us home with a bit more of an active session. So I want to really welcome, and again, the beauty of virtual is that we have Andrea here to do this with us, and otherwise wouldn't have had the opportunity to bring her in. So Andrea is a health and physical activity education teacher in the York Region District School Board in Ontario. She's a strong advocate for people living with disabilities and has presented on equity and inclusion for people with disabilities for the Holland Blearview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital, Sick Kids Hospital, and the Jumpstart Inclusive Play Project. And although I've been following Andrea on social media for years, we only finally got to meet last December at a national research piece that we were part of together. So, but super excited to have Andrea here today. She's got a massive breadth of experience. And I see that she started screen sharing, and I think that maybe froze her a little bit. So we'll just maybe give it a second for that to pop back on. Andrea, I'm going to turn it over to you. So hopefully you're ready to go. Yeah.
Awesome. Do you see, give me a thumbs up if you see my screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm clear. Okay. I'm so excited to be here. This is, this workshop connects with me close to heart. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. Just a quick background. I've been teaching for 19 years now, 17 years as a health and physical education teacher in the elementary panel, meaning kindergarten, grade 1 to grade 8 in Ontario. I also have 2 children. My daughter, older daughter, is 11 years old. You'll hear me talking a lot about her within this workshop. She has multiple disabilities ranging from a rare genetic disorder called Pitt-Hopkins syndrome, also on the severe end of the autism spectrum, and she is also having a cortical vision impairment. So I'll bring a lot of her into this workshop, and having the 2 hats of mom advocate intersecting with my role as a health and physical education teacher is this wonderful workshop called Play Beyond the Label. When I present, it's very interactive. However, virtual is a total different world for me for the health and physical education world. So I welcome you to raise your hand, ask your questions in the chat box. I have Andrea Carey to help me moderate. So Andrea, if there's something that happens to pop up in the chat box that I missed, please feel free to interrupt me, and I have no problem with it. All right, so we're gonna get started right away. So the workshop objectives, first off, number 1, I wanted to review just the knowledge of students' disabilities. So you'll hear me interchanging the term disability, special needs, exceptionalities a lot, but I'll try my best to stick with the term disabilities. And I'll also refer to the learner as students just because I have my teacher hat on, okay? Number 2, also understanding how to provide appropriate accommodations and modifications and the difference between those 2 terms to support student achievement and success, whether you are in the education field or the physical activity provider field, or even at the high performance level in the coaching level, okay? And the last part is pretty neat. I usually take my participants through a 3-part interactive lesson where we're actually playing all the games. But for today, I've tried my best to make it the virtual world in my phys ed classroom. And I'm going to try my best to keep it as interactive as possible. So once again, add your information, your any questions you want in the chat box throughout the workshop. So let's get started. So I wanted to take you through a thinking routine, and what a thinking routine is just to get your minds on and what the topic we're going to talk about today, okay? So I'm going to show you a series of different pictures of people that are right in our community, okay? I want you to, number 1, take a look at the picture. And number 2, this is where you're going to show me some participation in the chat box. You're going to take off the hat that you're wearing right now, whether it be a teacher's hat, a support staff hat, community organization, advocate, athlete, coach, but you're going to think from society's perspective. I want you to share what you think this person can or cannot do. Okay, so not from your perspective, what you think this person can or cannot do. Okay, let me just get this minimized. Here we go. So get your fingers ready into the chat box. Here's a picture of a Caucasian woman, glasses, sitting in a wheelchair. Please share from society's perspective what you think she can or cannot do. Cannot walk, thank you. Think about life skills, right? What did you do this morning to get to where you are today, whether you're working at home or you had to go into work? Cannot run, can cook. Interesting. Think about getting dressed, communication, can brush teeth, cannot drive, cannot provide for herself or family. Thank you. Anything that she can do from society's perspective. Can brush, style her hair, yeah. Very well-dressed person, yeah. She can use her arms, definitely, can tell by her wheelchair. Confident, can speak. Okay, I'm gonna give you, show you who Heather is. Heather is an athlete who I compete with. I'm part of an organization called, an organization where we race at a competitive level, running alongside able-bodied athletes. And this organization is called My Team Triumph Canada, where we advocate to get athletes who have disabilities starting at the front of the line instead of way at the back of the line. So when I'm racing, I'm pushing my daughter in her racing wheelchair. And this is where I met Heather. Heather is a triathlete. She is a mother, she is a wife, and she's also, someone said she speaks very confidently and communicates very well in the chat box. Yes, she is actually an advocate and does guest speaking across Ontario. So her advice to educators, physical activity is a chance to help each and every student to learn to use the body they have in the best way possible, okay? Thank you for all your responses. I'm going to show you another picture. Here we have a little boy in his stander. He's on the grass with a soccer ball in front of him. So I want you to jump into the chat box. What do you think he can or cannot do from society's perspective? And once again, think about maybe positioning of him, who's with him in the picture, can experience joy, thank you. Can kick, can play, definitely. Can be in the community, thank you. He's out there, he's on the grass. Make people feel love, happiness, and laughter. What do you think he cannot do? Can interact with others, okay. Can't participate in risky play, might be something individuals would say. Thank you. May not speak, he cannot drive. Thank you. So I'm gonna jump on quickly to Sebastian. Sebastian is 9 years old. He's actually one of my daughter's friends. He is nonverbal, but amazing enough. He's cognitively at his grade level and he communicates solely with his eyes. He has an iPad that is calibrated to his eyes. And when you talk to him, his eyes go as fast as how you would think someone would be talking. He also has a service dog. He's a grandson and a friend. And his advice to educators: get to know me. I have a lot to say and I understand you too. Okay. I'm going to jump onto the next picture. This is a little girl sitting on the couch. And I want you to think from society's perspective what you think she can or cannot do. Once again, think about, even if you have children, what did you do this morning to get your children to school, whether it was online or face-to-face? Think of feeding, toileting, getting dressed. Think about when you walk to the grocery store. What do you think society thinks of these people when they see them out in the public? Can play. Thank you, Andrea. What do you think people assume she cannot do? Cannot socialize, thank you. Feed herself, yeah. Maybe just by how her arms are positioned or what you see in the picture. Can have lots of fun, yeah. Can tell she's smiling. I'll wait for a few more responses. Cannot walk, okay. So here we have Emma. Emma is age 12. She's a bossy older sister. She's a daughter. She's diagnosed with a developmental delay, and she has a form of dwarfism. She is in high school currently. So this was a picture that was taken back then when she was 12. And she has a power wheelchair to move from point A to point B. But she is integrated into her high school. However, she's in a community class where she's with peers who are cognitively at her level. Her advice to educators: help build my confidence and the confidence of those around me to show people that I am capable. Okay. I'm going to jump to a video right now that I wanted to show you to just summarize this thinking routine that I took you through. And first of all, I want to thank you for sharing your comments in the chat box on what society's perspective is on these pictures that were shown. But when you watch this video, I want you to think about, from your role as an educator, physical activity driver, or whatnot, of how this video connects with you. Okay, and Andrea, please let me know if this sound does not work. You just got to give it a few seconds.
Your heart sings like a kettle, and your words, they boil away like steam, and the lie burns long while the truth bites quick. Our heart is built for both, it seems. You are lonely as a church despite the queuing out your door. I am empty as a promise, no more. When the time comes and rights have been read, I think of you often, but for once I meant what I said.
I always tear up when I watch this video. This video is called Eyes of a Child. And I really thought it was a nice video to close up what we were doing just now with the pictures. Quick question. I have 3 questions for you, and these are guiding questions, and I want you to write in the chat box your responses, okay? So, oh, someone says, wow, thank you. Okay, first question. What assumptions were the adults making about the people on the screen during the first few rounds of this activity? So you saw that the parent and the child were divided. There was a screen in front of them, and they had to mirror. What assumptions were the adults making about the people on the screen at the first few rounds? They were normal people, yeah, neurotypical. They were assuming that the adults were choosing to make those silly faces, yeah. Fun, appropriate. Leslie, thank you for saying that. Why did you choose the word appropriate in quotations? That it was appropriate to copy them, yeah. My mom will tell me, don't make that face, otherwise it might stay that way, okay? I think this illustrates that the adults had a filtered perspective. Thank you. Okay, take a look at this question. How might external factors such as age, background knowledge, experience, education change the reactions of both the adults and children at the end of the video? So at the end of the video, you had a girl in a wheelchair who did the exact same thing. She did a funny pose, stuck her finger up her nose. But what do you think was different? Like it was so raw. Think about, I guess, the experiences we have as adults versus children. A child sees a child, not someone different from them. Yep, the adults have lived their whole lives being told that folks like the nose picker are different, and that it isn't okay to talk about that kids just see them as someone making a face. Thank you. Sorry, my eyes aren't that well when the font is so small. The parent saw the disability. Bang on, right? I showed my son this video, and he's 3 years younger than my daughter, and he was just like, what's wrong? This is funny. Like he didn't understand why the adults were not doing what the person on the screen was making the funny faces. And I just thought that it was really fascinating to see, because there's so many things around us, external factors that can hinder or create biases for us that we might not even know as educators or in our leadership role, that yes, it may affect how we deliver our programming, right? And it's just a food for thought. Number 3, how does watching this video prompt you to reflect your own teaching practice, coaching practice, programming provider practice in your role in physical education or in sport? Lead by example. Thank you. And I even think being in the education sector, it's just so important to have an open mind, whether you have experience in this field or not, right? Definitely. Thank you, Daniel. Keep it fun when you can. Awesome. Keep the comments coming. I'm just going to jump into the next slide to make sure I stay on time. So this part of the workshop is where we're going to be going through the umbrella of understanding different types of disabilities. I'm also going to give you a few snapshots of short videos and pictures of in my school. My school is a kindergarten to grade 8 school, mainstream school. However, we also have we're very lucky to have a community class. So a community class in my school board is a segregated class within a mainstream school where there are a maximum of 6 kids. This community class is a designated autism class. These students are not able to handle the mainstream classroom. However, they are in their own programming most of the day, but then there are opportunities where they're integrated. So when this class is integrated, they come to me for phys ed, where they are integrated with peers their age or age appropriate, and other subjects such as music and art, and obviously they're outside for recess, okay? So just to give you some background knowledge of the examples I will be showing you. So the first type of disability I wanted to go through, it's really important to know your learner. And if you don't know your learner, my biggest rule is any game is not the best game if you are not able to accommodate or modify the activity to meet your learner's needs, okay? So the first disability that I want to go through is a cognitive or intellectual disability. Individuals who are diagnosed with a cognitive or intellectual disability exhibit a significant delay in measured intelligence, adaptive functioning, and academic functioning. So this can be acquired brain injury, very common in our education system, autism spectrum, neurological impairment, and Down syndrome. So Bella, who's my daughter, she is 11 years old, but she's cognitively at a 12-month-old baby. So when you see her, she's not that little toddler I can take out in the community anymore, but it's very hard for the community to understand because she acts like a baby, right? But she's probably almost my height now, right? So when you have a student in your class or program with a cognitive disability, it's really important to understand how to modify for this learner, okay? So I'm gonna show you a quick video right now. This video is taken in the community class when they come into the gym on their own for their own phys ed programming. So they have phys ed twice a week just by themselves. I work very closely with this teacher that you see in this video to create their individual physical education program. So in their IEP, their individual education program, I help her create their phys ed program page where they have individualized target goals, and where I work closely with the PT, OT to make sure that these goals also meet their physical needs, right? And the reason why I work collaboratively with this teacher is so that when these kids also come to me for the integrated class, I know what they are capable of, and I'm also able to create an entry point in whatever game that I'm doing, okay? So I'm gonna, this video right here is a video clip of my colleague Laura, and the student that she's with is 6 years old. He's in grade 1, but he's cognitively at a pre-K level. So the expectation that he's working on from the curriculum is a modified from the expectation, performing a variety of locomotor movements, traveling in different directions, and using different body parts. This student is unable to do this expectation right now. So the modified expectation would be just simple motor demands, such as stopping and going with a verbal and a visual cue. Okay, so I'm going to press play here. Good job. Let's go. Stop. Good job. Stop. One here. If he's pushing, right? Stop. Yeah. When he pushes, he's air. Yeah. Unless it's personal. Okay. Learning disability. Learning disability is also very present in our classrooms today. A learning disability is an exceptionality found in children of average intelligence who have difficulties learning specific skills. So areas of deficiency include input, so understanding the information coming in, making sense of the information that's in, and storing and retrieving and being able to understand and be able to perform the task. This affects 5 to 10% of the population, and a lot of it has to do with processing information, okay? So the next slide, and please once again, stop me if I'm going too fast, is a picture of a student in the community class, but this is during the actual mainstream phys ed class, right? And he's right now with his support worker. He's cognitively at his grade level. However, he requires the support worker to stay on task. He has a learning disability. He has challenges understanding what he needs to do at the beginning of phys ed class, such as reading the warm-up on the chalkboard, putting on his penny, finding his color group, and then completing the first activity. So as you can see, he's standing in front of his schedule board that has concrete pictures of the expectations to show him visually what needs to be done when he enters phys ed class. He's physically moving each activity on the schedule board from the to-do column to the all done column. And this helps him process the information on what expectation needs to be done at the beginning of class, okay? Physical disability. A physical disability affects a child's ability to perform physical activities. For example, a child may have trouble hearing, seeing, speaking, or walking. Children with physical disabilities may need support in the following areas, such as moving around the gymnasium, manipulating equipment, self-management. So I'm going to bring in my daughter in this example. My daughter has a physical disability. She has something called cortical vision impairment. So with her glasses, she has 20/20 vision. However, when she is in a large gymnasium with balls flying around, it's really hard for her to move safely around the gymnasium because it's hard for her to understand, I need to be able to move around the gymnasium safely, also navigating with the music playing or the noise that's happening, and still be able to perform the task. So this is something that affects her both physically and cognitively, okay? This example over here is a video clip taken in the integrated grade 1 class. The student with his pinny that's half on, just because he didn't want to put on his pinny that day, is from my colleague's class. He's integrated into my class right now. He's with his EA, his educational assistant, because he has a physical disability. He has low muscle tone, which affects his ability to perform gross motor movements as compared to his peers. In this video, what you'll see is that he's out of his wheelchair. However, his EA is with him in the event that the student were to fall. The students in the class are demonstrating the ability to move and stop safely and in control with an awareness of people and equipment around him, right? So this is our gymnastics unit you'll see here, and this is one of the centers. And the students are traveling on and off the little steppers and their hurdles. However, his expectation is just to walk safely between the two rows that I've created with no prompts, okay? There you go. Okay. So I know I flew through that very quickly. Please feel free to ask me any questions regarding this. But the reason, once again, I go over this is that many educators forget to take the time to know the learner. And it's really important that we understand the different types of disabilities that are out there in our classroom so that we're able to understand how to meet their needs, okay? So the next few slides, what I'm going to do is going over the different supports that we can provide our students, whether it be in the class, phys ed classroom, or in sport, okay? Take a look over here, and this is where I want you to jump into the chat box with me. What do the following pictures have in common? In the middle top, we have a female in a wheelchair with his laptop. Oh, there's my internet. Sorry, hopefully you can hear me right now. On the right, we have a little pylon that I use in my classroom to show a student where to sit. Then we have a first then strip. We have a token system for behavior. At the bottom, on the bottom right, that's my daughter and her service dog. Someone said adaptations, all accommodations. Thank you, Kate. I think Kate's an educator. Okay, so you're right. These are all accommodations. I'm not going to read this slide. The one thing I want you to remember is that I want you to think of accommodations as stuff that you can add to the game, or activity to help support the learner to meet the expectations, whether it's to kick a ball by adapting the ball into a ball that has bells in it, instead of holding a football to send to the partner, holding a rubber chicken to send to the partner, right? So accommodations are basically things and supports that you can add to help the learner meet the expectations. The expectation is not changed. So accommodations can be instructional accommodations. So I can demonstrate how the activity should be done. I can have scribe it. I can have pictures. Environmental accommodations, the way I set up my classroom, having anchor charts on the wall, having visuals, and even assessment accommodations, a variety of ways for the student to demonstrate their learning. Okay. On my next screen, I forgot to move that yellow, ignore that yellow arrow at the bottom. No worries for that. So I have two examples here, and I wanted to share with you what these two examples have in common, okay? So the first example, what we have is expectation in our Ontario curriculum, the phys ed Ontario curriculum, would be locomotion skills. So such as learning how to slide, walk, skip, run, jump, gallop, and a modified, if you have a child who is unable to do this expectation, okay? I will give you an example. My daughter has a physical disability. She is unable to meet this expectation. Her modified expectation would be simply learning how to stop and go on verbal command. Okay. Expectation example number 2. Another expectation from our Ontario curriculum is sending an object to a target. and a modified expectation. If a learner is unable to meet that expectation, I have a picture of a bucket, and the student would just be asked to hold the object and drop the object into the bucket. So after I have explained these two examples, what do you think these two examples have in common? What did I do to the expectations to help the learner be successful? And feel free to write in the chat box. So we knew what the expectation in the curriculum was. What did I do to it to help the learner be successful? Thank you. Oh, Kate, for sure Kate is a teacher. Adapted the task for success. Thank you. So those two examples were examples of modifications. So when a child is unable to meet the expectations, it's really important we understand how to modify the expectations. So modifications are changes made to the age-appropriate grade level expectations for a subject in order to meet the student's learning needs. So it's a significant change, okay? Oh, thank you, Paul. Created achievable goals. Thank you, okay? So this is probably the last part. I feel so bad because I had to take out a lot of this workshop in order to meet the timing, but we're entering the last part of our workshop right now, where I'm going to take you through a 3-part lesson, okay? So before I go through that, I really wanted to make sure that I took these 2 screenshots. The golden rule whenever we're teaching a game, delivering an activity, even if we are going to take your athletes through a specific drill or activity, it's really important that you know your learner, okay? And taking that time to know your learner will help them be successful, because whatever game that you have planned, if you don't even know the learners, that game and activity that you spent so long in planning won't even be accessible or even realistic for the athletes or the students that you have, okay? So what we're going to do right now, that's a picture of my entrance board when you come in. I'm going to take you through a 3-part lesson. So a 3-part lesson is education lingo. A 3-part lesson is basically a minds-on activity, an action activity, and a consolidation activity. So these steps in a lesson plan help the students in my class meet the learning goal. So the learning goal that I have up there says, we are learning how to try our best when sending and receiving a variety of objects while working alone and with others. This learning goal is in student-friendly language for my class of grade 4s. Okay, and this learning goal is comprised from expectations in our Ontario curriculum. So for this unit, this was our learning goal for the next 4 weeks. Okay, and all the games and activities that I do in my unit connect back to this exact learning goal. Okay, and when we're meeting this learning goal, I always like to deliver my lessons in a 3-part lesson, and that's what I'm going to take you through now. The first one is called a minds-on activity, and this is where the skills, concepts, and strategies to the learning goal is introduced, okay? I'm gonna go into the next one. So the first game we're gonna play is called Flip the Hoop. I'm gonna explain the game, and then I'm gonna show you how it's played. So the setup of the game, you're gonna place the students in groups of 2, so they're working in pairs. You're gonna have them stand with their partners at a safe distance apart at the starting line. Each group is going to have 1 hoop and 1 object to throw. So partner A stands at the starting line to throw the object to partner B, who is standing in the hoop in front of partner A face to face, ready to receive the object. So when partner A sends the object to partner B is successful at receiving the object, they're allowed to flip the hoop forward in the direction of the finish line. If partner B is unsuccessful at catching the object or receiving the object, they cannot move the hoop. So the objective of the game is to work together in pairs to move the hoop from start to finish, okay? And here's what it looks like. So you see partner A is standing right there in the green penny. She's sending her object to partner B, who's standing in the hoop. So they've already made it from the starting line all the way this far, okay? And the objective of the game is to send this chicken or whatever object they chose to her partner B, and then they slowly move the hoop towards the end, okay? So it's a really fun game that I played with my class. And this, once again, connects back to the learning goals, sending and receiving objects while working together, okay? And then this is where I'm going to put you to the test, okay? I'm going to give you a student profile now of a student who is in this class, okay? Student Sophia is in grade 4. She's a student with autism spectrum disorder. She has some fine motor difficulties, including grasping small objects. She also has a sensory processing disorder, which includes sensitivities to loud noises and visual stimuli. So think about that game in your head. Can you tell me in the chat box if the student needs accommodations or modifications or both, knowing the student profile I just read? And please feel free to write in the chat box. So if this student, both, okay, thank you, Michelle. So don't forget, accommodations is adding stuff to the game to help the student be successful. Modifications is changing the expectation to help the learner meet the needs, meet the expectations. Someone else says both. I'm curious, why do you say both? I don't know if you can turn on your mic, or you can type if you don't feel comfortable turning on your mic. Okay, Jenny says accommodations. Thank you, Jenny. Both could change the object to something larger, but also could adjust the expectations. Okay, access to large, easy catch objects, accommodations. Modify would be shorter distance to cover. Okay, so I'm going to give you the answer. The answer would be just modifications, and maybe I didn't give you enough information, okay? And this is why I'm going to catch myself in this mistake. I didn't tell you that this student, Sophia, is at grade 4 level, okay? Because she is at grade 4 level and cognitively in phys ed, she's actually at working at expectation. I actually don't need to change the expectation of sending and receiving while working with her partner. So I'm going to say yes. All the examples that you've given, accommodations is correct. Changing the object, maybe even having no noise, do the task with no one talking. However, someone said, I'm just going to scroll back up saying, Paul said leaning towards accommodations. Modifications. So if Sophia has a hard time focusing, and it could be due to her sensory processing disorder, just the loud noises, the objects flying left, right, and center, right? Changing the expectation of just static, where she doesn't have to move the hoop from point A to point B, and just, Kate says, just having it to send and receive the object at a short distance, that would be modifying the expectation. So I agree with Kate. So it could be accommodations and or modifications, but once again, we kind of need to know more about the learner in order to make that decision if we're going to modify the expectation of the game. So thank you everyone for participating in that one. Okay. Action activity. So action activity is where the students get to really practice the skill, concepts, and strategies introduced in the learning goal. So once again, the learning goal is sending and receiving with a variety of objects while working alone with the others. So this game, I'm just going to explain it out loud. It's called Mic Drop. And the students work in groups of 4 or 5, standing in a circle with a pool noodle. Each of them will have a pool noodle. And the goal of the game is to drop their pool noodle, which is their mic, and move one step to their right to their peer's spot. So they got to move at the same time while catching the other person's mic before it drops on the ground. Okay. So you can see over here, this is where we're playing it for our daily physical activity outside. As they drop the mic, the person in the student wearing the jeans is moving to her right, and that person's moving to her right, and so forth. Okay, and once again, this is another game meeting the learning goal. Here we have Angie. Here's another student profile. She's also in grade 4, cognitively at grade 3 level. She has cerebral palsy that affects the motor movement of the left side of her body. She travels using a walker and is able to stand on her own. Okay, and this, I already gave you the answer. Okay, so over here, I actually said that she needs both accommodations and modifications because she has a physical disability where her left side of the body is not as able-bodied as her right side of the body. We're going to be able to change the expectation and also provide modifications. So here I have a picture of scarves. Scarves will be easier to send and receive. And maybe the modification would not even be moving, right? Where it would be static, where sending and receiving with her peers, okay? I'm just looking at my clock right now. I have 5 more minutes. I'm going to quickly go through. Andrea, if you can hop onto the mic, I want to ask you a quick question.
Okay, here I am.
Okay. I'm going to jump quickly through the last activity, and then the video at the end would be 5 minutes. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, so the last thing that I'm going to show you is our consolidation activity. And this is where I would take my students through 5 different centers where they get to practice their skills, concepts, and strategies and be able to demonstrate it in a different way. So once again, they are still meeting the learning goal of sending and receiving a variety of objects in different ways, alone and with others, okay? I'm going to skip the student profile for now, but what I want you to really understand is that all these examples still meet the same expectation, but all of the variety really not just helps the students with disabilities, but helps all students be successful, whether it be adding visuals, adding different types of equipment. So right over here is a game called ladder ball where students have to send a string ball to the ladder. Each ladder is at different points. Another corner of the gym, we have curling going on, sending the rocks to a target. Here we have, you've probably seen this game go viral on Twitter or Facebook, is a game of sending the object into a target, but it's a tic-tac-toe grid where they're working against another person, another teammate. This game I made up, I'm very proud of. It's called Dice Bonk, where they have to send, you can see the purple rubber chicken, to knock the dice off of the pylon. And whatever number shows up on the dice, that's the number the team gets. And the goal of the game is to get to number 21 the fastest. So even though you have good aim, it doesn't mean that you'd be the first team to win, right? Because whatever number shows up in the dice, that's the number you get. This game is called Hole in One, kind of like golf, but you're sending the object into the hoop, but the goal of the game is to not knock down any of the pins, okay? So this comes to the end of my workshop. Once again, I apologize for rushing through everything, but I'm going to share my contact at the end. The biggest thing that I want you to leave with is that if everyone, whether you're an educator, parent, physical activity provider, coach, if you just take the time to get to know the learners, it would just be great for the whole community. And the end goal is that you just want them to move, enjoy movement, and move with a purpose. So this last video is a video that I created to share the journey of the community class that's in our school and how they are learning alongside students and peers their age in an integrated environment, okay? And once again, let me know in the chat box if you can hear everything. It just takes a few minutes for the sound to come on.
When you try your best but you don't succeed, when you get what you want but not what you need, when you feel so tired but you can't sleep, stuck in tears come streaming down your face. When you lose something you can't replace, You never try, you never know just what you Lights will guide you. I will try fix you.
So that's the end of the workshop. So sorry that I went over by 3 minutes, but here's my contact information. Let me know if you need anything else, but I'm here. I'm very grateful that Andrea Stacy invited me. I hope you have an awesome rest of the day, but thank you so much. It was such a privilege to be part of this great event.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrea. And what a pleasure to get to share this stage with you. I have so much respect for the work that you're doing and the inclusion that you're creating in classrooms and gyms and many other settings across the country. So thank you for that. So yeah, I do just want to acknowledge each of our speakers today. It's been such an incredible few hours together. And so I want to acknowledge Marco, who kicked us off this morning, Bruce, Carolyn, and Richard for an incredible panel, and then Andrea for this great last session. So Andrea, I know, is going to share her contact in the chat box, but yeah, some incredible information and presentations today. And a big thank you to all of you for sticking with us through a 3-hour Zoom session. I also want to thank Pisey for being our virtual host today and learning as we went in the creation of this. So a huge thanks to the team at Pisey for pulling this off and making this maybe our new normal. I also want to thank Morgan Chandler, who was a volunteer that stepped in to assist us in getting this session up and running. And then to the Victoria Foundation for the financial support for today and for all of the work that OneAbility does. And last but not least, I want to circle back to the incredible Alec Nelson, who is back with us to close us off. Alec set us up for such a great day today with opening our session and giving us some good intentions to move into this space together. So I'm going to turn it back over to Alec, and when he wraps up, that is the end of the session. So over to you, my friend.
Great, thanks, Andrea. This past 3 hours has been awesome and wonderful, and boy, golly, eye openers in many ways. And I just go back to my analogy of the cedar tree and that lightning bolt that caused a cedar bough to land on the ground. And I just found it so awesome. These last this presentation regarding children, and that's where my mind went. Was the day after this storm hit, it becomes nice and calm, and there's a little boy that picks up the same cedar bough, and knowing it has magic, and it starts to behave in a way that it's just encouraging. And there again is the resilience that I start to sense with all the speakers here, and then the stories that follow. I can't say enough about that. And at the same time, I do say, Creator, thank you for offering us this togetherness. Thank you for offering us the messages and the experiences and ways that we could look forward to continue our personal growth, and especially for our children. And with this, I just want to say, Andrea, thank you, and for the invitation to be a part of this. Thank you once again for coming to shake hands with our hearts. Take care and be safe. Way.
Goodbye, everyone. Have a great day.